And I'm on a mission to connect with every creative writer in the world. And I need your help. The world is constantly changing, which is why it's our duty. No, it's our responsibility to inspire creativity. My creative writing tips, tricks, and strategies are gonna help you become a better writer, so that way you can beat procrastination. Join me on this journey to unite the creative writing industry. And let's inspire creativity in the world together. What does creative writing mean to you? Welcome to the Story and Critique Show. I'm your host, Kauffman, and today we have an exciting show for you. The Story and Critique Show is the first live weekly workshop where writers from the community will submit their stories for live readings and critiques that will be read aloud by me and will be given critiques by both myself and other writers who are here and would like to participate. So today we have a good sized and a good number of submissions. I believe we have about 7 to 9 so far. So make sure that if you want your story read, to send an excerpt to the below email on the ticker, thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. All right, and just some quick housekeeping. If you're hopping in on the replay, don't worry, I got you covered. Let's say that you missed a part of your critique, or you want to go back and hear it again, or maybe you want to skip to the story that was really the most exciting for you. In the video description below, there will be time codes added after the stream ends, so that way you can skip to the part that you prefer. All right, perfect. Now, in terms of our schedule today, we're going to be starting off with the story and critique show first. We'll be doing some live readings and critiques. I got some exciting stories queued up for you. And then if you stick around till after, we'll be doing our daily writing sprint, where I'm working on Last Scarecrow and my heroes are going through a graveyard and they're dealing with some demons, to say the least. All right, let's hop into the comments. Isabella, welcome to the stream. Isabella and our normal atomic elf in the mix. Atomic, you need your I think you need your entrance for our little playlist. Atomic elf in the house. This is his mix, by the way. And Bethany, welcome to the stream. I'm so happy you made it back. Welcome. And Maammy Telly, welcome to the stream as usual, my friend. Let's see, I've actually been catching up on some of your videos. Awesome, thank you. I hope that they're bringing you a lot of value. And by the way, if you're new to this experience and you're not familiar with my Kauffman's Corner YouTube channel, I have daily live workshops, readings, interviews. I have weekly writing videos and video shorts to help you become a better writer and hopefully give you a little motivation, because let's be real, the writing process can be hard, but it can be made easy and it can be made fun. And I am of the genuine belief that that is possible. Woo, we got the normal atomic today. I'm glad we got normal atomic. I know, right? I was like, atomic, you get your musical entrance now as thanks for giving us some great background music for our for the streams. All right. So as we hop into it, so right before we hop into the show itself, I want to just highlight tomorrow's show. So the Creative Right Now podcast is going to be called How to Channel Your Inner Writer with Flow Your Mojo. This is going to be a first live video podcast where we're actually going to be doing a live workshop in the podcast that you can take for your writing to better channel your inner writer and overcome things like writer's block and common things that every writer deals with. Chris works over with Flow Your Mojo, where he helps writers by channeling their inner writing capability through readings, tarot readings, and spiritual understanding. He has a very unique system, and I am so excited to welcome him to the stream tomorrow. So make sure that you drop by the stream tomorrow. The podcast is going to be a little earlier than our usual Sunday time. We'll be streaming at, I want to say it's 12 p.m. I want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct time. Streaming at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Yes, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific. So make sure that you stay tuned for tomorrow because it's probably going to be one of our coolest podcasts so far. All right, and let's see, Bethany. Yes, I'm excited. I watch a few others keep me zoned, and I love catching lives for fellow writers. Not many writing community meetups in my small town. Yeah, Bethany, I'm actually in the same boat as you. I used to, when I lived in California and San Francisco and Hollywood, there were so many writers groups, but now where I live, I'm in like such a small community and writing groups just don't exist. And since I've been involved in so many over the past decade, I wanted to bring a writing group environment to a live stream format. And we have a really cool growing community. We're here every day, so definitely feel free to join us when you're free. Hey, what's up, Ann? Welcome to the stream. Thank you for dropping by. I have your story queued up in just a little bit, so I'm definitely looking forward to getting into it. Welcome, welcome. All right, so let's start. Let me adjust my reading as we're going to get into the live story reading and critique. So the first one that I actually have queued up, I got Miss Isabella Jones. Isabella, I got your story excerpt for the Lovespell murders. I know we've been looking to get into this next excerpt of your story for a couple weeks now. So while I cue that up, bear with me just a moment. All right, and I have to adjust my screen slightly so that way I can make sure it all fits. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, here we go. All right, awesome. So I'm set up on my end. So before we hop into it, let's see. Let me check this. Atomic, whereabouts did you live in SF? I was born in South SF and lived in the area for a while. Great question. So if you're familiar with California, San Francisco, I didn't live in San Francisco itself, but I just assume most people probably aren't familiar with San Francisco, since I think the majority of our community is actually Central Coast. I think the majority is Central Coast with some mixes from East and West, and then some international audience as well. But when I was over in San Francisco, I actually lived closer to the San Jose area, specifically Santa Clara. It was a great experience. I was there for about a year and a half, but I was in San Francisco every weekend because my brother lives over in the Golden Gate Park in that area over there. So it was such a fun experience. Absolutely loved it. I'm of the mindset that like perfect world for me, I can get this writing business well established and then travel consistently to writing events, writing workshops, meet up with other writers. That's like my perfect, my vision. So if I had a vision board, that's the type of work I'm going to be doing over the next couple of years. Thanks for asking, Atomic. Appreciate it. Hey, what's up, Ketan? Welcome, welcome, my friend. I got your story queued up for just a little bit. Thank you for dropping by, my dude. All right, and what do we got today? All right, so the submission process. So there's a couple of housekeeping rules that I want to go over. So the way that I accept submissions, I'll usually do them as a first come, first served basis. So I start accepting submissions from the previous Saturday. Feel free to send them to my email, The Creative Ghostwriter, and then I start them in the order that I receive. Now, I've been trying something different lately. I want to be able to highlight new writers who are submitting for the first time. So I'm going to prioritize, I'm going to try this for a couple weeks. I'm going to prioritize brand new writers who I've never received a submission from. So that way they can also see the value, because my thinking is that more writers that join the community, the more we will get amazing feedback, the more you get great opinions when we're doing your story reading. So that's something that I'm trying. Right now, in terms of submissions, I want to say I get on average about 70% returning and 30% new. So like right now, I think that's the balance that I want to keep. If at a point in the future I start getting like way too many new ones, then I'll adjust accordingly, because I definitely want to value my all you returning and my main community members, because I really appreciate you guys showing up. I had like so much fun chatting with each of you and getting to know your stories. All right. And then in terms of the formatting, so let's see, I can actually pull up Isabella so you can see here. All right, so in terms of the formatting, you'll see that generally what gets sent to me, I adjust the formatting into Comic Sans and double spaced, so that way you can read along as I'm doing the story. So that way you're able to pay attention and able to see what I'm going through. As such, the page count is probably going to be way off. So don't worry about the page count. Now, in terms of the timing, I give every single story roughly 20 minutes. 10 minutes for a reading, 10 minutes for a critique. I try to stick close to that. If I'm like close to the end of an excerpt, I'll try to get through the rest of it. But I try to be as fair as possible so I can try to get through as many stories as I'm able to. And then join the critique. So if you're here in the community, you are highly, highly, highly encouraged to join in the critique. So when I'm giving my feedback for a story after the reading, feel free to shout out and be like, mention things that you really liked. If there's something specific that really stood out to you, throw it in the comments. Because as writers, my thinking is that if we're putting our story out there, we want feedback. All feedback is great feedback. You have to know that if somebody is taking the time to respond and comment on your story, they want your story to be better. So all feedback is encouraged. We haven't had any problem commenters up until this point. So right now we have a really positive community, and I'm really proud and happy to share that. And what's up, Alpha? Welcome to the stream. Alpha in the house. Thank you, my man. The nice hat. Keeping it classy. I realized that with the predominance of the weekend streams that I wanted to keep like the Saturdays and Sundays like a little, just like a little of a higher caliber vibe, whereas the Monday through Friday, the Kauffman Writes casual, I wanted to keep it a little more like low key and chill. So definitely been having a lot of fun. Thank you. Let's see, Bethany. I'm a freehand writer because my schedule, I debate whether or not to go ahead and transfer to computer or wait till I've handwritten it all out. Freehand makes my schedule. Yeah, that actually totally makes sense. I think for me, it just depends on where I'm at. I think there's definitely times, Bethany, where if I'm out and about in public, I actually keep, I don't have my notebook right next to me, but I have a notebook that I always keep with me so I can write down notes and write down stories. And then sometimes when I'm near my computer, I'm working on my computer. Throughout middle school and high school, my very first story spanned about 10 to 15 notebooks worth of writing. It was my first like epic fantasy story. I sat in the back of the class and wrote every day. So I totally understand you on that. It was a doozy to translate everything to the computer. So I totally resonate with that. All right. So let's see. And then I think that was all. And then a last note, if you see me highlighting a portion as I'm doing the reading, totally like it doesn't mean anything bad or good. I highlight as I go, so that way I'll remind myself of points that I want to touch on when I go over my critique. All right, and I am all set. Perfect, and you guys can see this. Beautiful. Okay, and I got my highlighter. All right, and I am all set, Isabella. All right. Okay, so we got an excerpt from the Lovespell murders. If you've been sticking along with some of our previous Saturdays, you know that this is Isabella's been putting together this entire story, which is like this murder mystery that touches elements of Greek mythology, that touches elements of horror and romance, all set in this kind of like like next kind of like paranormal-ish type world where we're following these detectives as they're trying to uncover the mystery behind the Lovespell murders. And now we finally get to have fun with our protagonist. All right, all right, all right. I got 20 minutes on the clock. Make sure I'm good here, and I am set. Shortly after dawn, a bolt of lightning shot down through the slate gray sky. It connected with the ground and cast a pale blue field around it. Immediately, a terrifying boom crackled through the air. A few moments later, an urgent knock echoed through a small loft apartment. "Coming!" Alara said, rolling out of bed and grappling in the darkness for her kimono robe. She hastily swung it over her slight frame as she hurried to the front door. The knock came again. "I'm coming!" Detective Alara Monroe flung open the door and walked into a cloud of Ricky Anderson's rich, alluring cologne. "You'd be coming if you'd taken me up on my proposal, gorgeous," said the police department's photographer. Ricky grinned and flipped his light brown hair out of his eyes. They quickly darted into the darkness behind her, looking for traces of company. When he found none, they flicked back to her face, sharp as a hawk's. Most women found him attractive. Alara did too. Yet, any attraction she may have felt vaporized the second he opened his mouth. She scoffed. "I do just fine on my own." She wrapped the kimono tighter around her narrow shoulders as his keen glance drifted down her long neck. The kimono was pretty, a background of spring green ornamented with vines of pink roses and lined in gold. The fabric was light, breezy, sheer, exactly the kind of thing Alara didn't want to be wearing in front of him. "Yeah?" Ricky gazed too long at the sensitive, shallow dip at the bottom of her throat. When he looked back into her eyes, she had the fleeting thought that he would be a gentle lover. Then the words came. "Those battery-operated boyfriends are real clutch hardware for cougars like you." A look like cold flames flickered behind Alara's pale eyes. She doesn't like being teased, Ricky thought, and something dark inside of him said, "Good." "Anyway, Chief wanted you to have this," he said, holding up a manila envelope. "They're farm fresh photos. Took them 20 minutes ago. Zux and Ramos got the case. Tough titties for you and your gal pal," he said, referring to her partner, Perry. "You wish. What Bob and I did was your business," she finally stuttered. She couldn't deny the vibrator, but she was only 32. Hardly a cougar. How had Icky Ricky gotten under her skin so fast? Ugh, Icky Ricky. Ugh. She smiled to herself at the nickname her partner had given him. In a flash, she swiped the package out of his hand. He tried to jerk it back, but she was faster than he was. "Goodbye," she said, closing the door in his face. "Don't you want to know what's inside the envelope?" came his muffled voice from behind the door. All he heard in response was the sound of the lock's click and the pad of her feet against the hardwood floor as she walked away. "Bitch," he hissed under his breath. That was fine. He had somewhere better to be anyway. Alara walked into her small kitchen and brewed a cup of coffee. As it percolated, she opened a package of chai tea and threw the bag in the carafe to steep with the brew. She needed the combination of strong coffee and black tea when she was exhausted. In the quiet moment that followed, Alara found herself lingering on the remnants of the dream she had just left behind. His face, those finely chiseled features arising among the stars from the mist of utter darkness. But she had felt something more, an unsettling sense that he wasn't just a part of the dream. He was real, alive. Who was he? Ugh. She shook out the remainder of the dream from her hair and placed the carafe and the package on a serving tray. Carrying everything to the table in the center of the apartment. She poured the dirty chai into a bone china cup. She opened the envelope marked confidential. The photographs scattered like autumn leaves across the table. Oh, she whispered softly. Alara brought the candle closer, casting a small circle of light in the darkness. This was her ritual, the way she began every investigation, with a single point of light fighting against encroaching darkness. The world outside melted away like wax, and she was left to study the crime scene in solitude. She held up one of the black and white photographs. She searched for what was hidden in the dance between shadow and light. Only the flame of a candle illuminated the darkness of her apartment. The soft features of her face shimmered like moonlight in the candle's flame. She was slight of frame. Her pale, creamy skin was framed by midnight hair falling over her delicate shoulders. Her light blue eyes were serene under dense lashes, and subtle lines tiptoed out from the corners. Dark ancestry had blossomed in her. A smile graced Alara's lips. Absently, her long fingers curled around the handle of the black and gold cup. She raised it and pursed her lips to take a slow sip. Even though the blend was rich and strong, no seduction of the senses could divert her thoughts from the stark mystery unfolding before her. Not the vexing synergy of Colombian and cardamom. Not the rhythmic raindrops that began to play at the window. Not even the cool breeze that rolled across her naked thighs, pricking at her skin. She remained fixated on the photographs scattered before her. In a husky voice, she began to speak into the recorder on her phone. As I look at these photographs, I feel like I'm standing in a gallery at the Met Museum, looking through the layers of a painting. So often crimes are quick, fumbling, dirty, like an amateurish fuck in the alley. This is different. This killer is intentional. She rifled through the photographs until she found the one she was looking for. The body had been carefully laid out, positioned like a doll. The killer had sketched, in blood, another human beside the victim. He's even arranged the bones he removed from the ribcage in an abstract pattern. It is all so intentional, methodical. He is an artist. Taking her candle and protecting the small flame, she stood and walked towards the lone artwork, adorning her apartment wall. Her open kimono swished against her naked body. With each step, the flame cast eerie shadows that swayed across the room. From the corner of her eye, she thought she saw details from the crime scene photographs flicker in the light and dark. A bit of white bone, the gray petal of a rose, and then more. Hints that lay beyond the photographs. The scent of coming rain. Grass flattening under the killer's bare footsteps as he walked toward the body. Warm blood dripping down his fingers as he prepared to paint. The murder's echoes died as she reached the wall. Alara raised the soft glow of the candle until it illuminated a handsome Greek face weighted down by a heavy burden. Her gaze shifted in soft light to the subject's contours. A man, his naked form almost concealed by a drape of burnt orange fabric. The sharp angles of his posture and his lyre contrasted with his serene features. The stroke of his fingertip across his brow. He vogued, caught between grief and the vague outline of destiny. To Alara, it seemed the misty hills that rose in the background murmured to him of a terrible choice to be made. Orpheus, she whispered, but he would not respond. Alara had an emptiness within her, a place where no echo lingered. It was vast and dark, like the night sky before the stars came into being. But this painting brought from her the first pangs of a bitter-sweet ache. Not unlike the spark of hope, Orpheus beckoned her to unravel this mystery, lured her into the labyrinthine chambers of her heart, where she followed until... Orpheus, she whispered to the ancient demigod. Orpheus, look at me. As if she could will the widower to raise his head. He refused her. She sighed. Fine. To hell and back, then. She turned to look at the puzzle that lay scattered in pieces on the table. So like her, Orpheus, those pieces, their mystery, posing for her, beckoning her. Alara sat at the table and rubbed her eyes. As she studied the photographs, she couldn't shake the feeling that the killer was a man who had been deeply wounded by tragedy, that he sought to relieve his grief through these monstrous acts, and his creativity had no sense of his depravity. Her fingers sought the small thread of gold she always wore on her wrist. End reading. Wow, that was a really great, well-written excerpt, Isabella. Wow. I feel like I kind of just have to like take a moment to just take that in. I felt that your description of both Alara and the world was so well done. You included such a level of details that made the scene come across as a kind of like, it had undertones of mystery, sexuality, and intrigue. And I think you combined the three styles very, very well in the story. After like reading this excerpt and now piecing it back together with all of the previous excerpts I had read, it gives me such a fuller view and a little more context on Alara, her description, and a little bit more on her mindset. I think after reading this excerpt, I love Alara's character way, way more. And I'm just so much more intrigued. And it's probably because you can tell this section really focuses on introducing her as a protagonist. And I think it's so intriguing. Absolutely well done. As I think about the critique guidelines, I would say that absolutely the strongest part, character development, well done. I'll give snaps for that. Very well done in character development. World building was very, very cool. We don't do too much world building in this section, but it's more as it pertains to the case. And then plot a little bit. I can tell there's some foreshadowing. So that was really well done. I think the biggest opportunities in this piece is what's also its strength, right? So I think there's a couple of clarifications. I would say 70, 80%, the detail is on point. There's about a 20 to 30% ratio where the detail could be cleaned up. Well, and I would say it's predominantly a little bit more in the beginning where the detail needs to be shortened or just need to be taken away. So that way it doesn't feel like you're trying to over describe. You've spent a really good job on describing everything. So now is the point where you can actually cut back a little bit. But I think it's important to be selective of what you cut back because there's some descriptions which are so unique, which do a great job of setting up the scene. Absolutely. Let's see. Let me just check comments. Yeah, I think this is absolutely. And I think once again, Isabella, I think what works really well with your writing is you have an intrinsic poetic style. And I think it's unique to you. I always like to consider that style is generally a mix of these 5 things: character development, world building, dialogue, plot, and structure. When we combine these 5 things in different ways, shapes, and forms, that is what gives us our own individual styles. Some writers leverage more character development, dialogue, and structure, and that is their style. Other writers will leverage world building and plot. Poetry tends to be a combination of dialogue, structure, and a little bit more, generally, it's either world building or character development that gives it a unique flow. Absolutely. So that's why poetry has its own rhythm. And I think that's what works very well with your writing, which has been consistent across every excerpt you've submitted. Yeah, and I would actually agree with John. There was parts especially with the asshole other detective in the beginning, or the photographer, that was great. I think that was a really good plot choice, introducing him and giving in making her feel minimized by this guy, because it creates almost this save the cat moment, which is absolutely perfect for making readers interested in our characters. 100%. So really great work with that. I think that the moment with the guy is a great example of using a save the cat to basically put the character in a situation. It doesn't have to be an extreme, but it puts her on the psychological defense. And that's something that I'm sure a lot of people, especially women, can probably relate to when they felt minimized, something that guys have felt as well. So I think that's something that's relatable, which does very well. So really good job on that. Now I want to touch on a couple things. So immediately a terrifying crack, boom crack through the air. I like that. I was highlighting it because you do a good job of setting up the scene, which is fun. Let's see. Let's see. So Alara rolled out of bed and grappled in the darkness for a kimono robe. She hastily swung it over her slight frame as she hurried to the door. So I think this is a really good example that I wanted to show you could clean up. She hastily swung it over her slight frame. I think because you do so much description of her, since she's basically just wearing a robe, I don't think slight is necessary. She hastily swung it over. Alara rolled out of bed and grappling in the darkness for a kimono robe. She swung it over her frame as she hurried to the front door. I think it's implied that because she's rolling out of the bed, it's implied that she's doing it quickly, right? So by cutting out those two descriptive words, she swung it over her frame as she hurried to the front door. Perfect. The knock came again. Wonderful. So it's little things like that. It's when you're looking at specific sentences, and this is usually what a line edit is for. Whenever you're ready for like the editing phase, usually a line editor will look either sentence or line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and looking for specific words. But what you can do in the meantime is basically looking for a sentence. What I like to do for myself, and this is a pro tip, if you're here in the community, if you're working on your story and before you're at a point with an editor, or maybe you're trying to like do as much editing yourself so you can minimize costs, if you're reading a section, read it aloud, cut out any words you think might be unnecessary. So like cut out any description words, reread it without the description words. Does it still make sense? If it still makes sense without those description words, then leave them out, right? But if you take out the description words and it doesn't make sense anymore, then that's a good sign that you're like, okay, I need to keep some of these words in. That's a really good, what I like to call a shit test, when you're going through your rough draft or your second draft and trying to figure out like what should be kept in, what doesn't. Okay. Let's see, back to it. I don't need Google Maps. I was like, okay. Let's see, I'm coming. Yeah, so this whole thing with the photographer is great. Let's see, they darted quickly in the dark to find looking for traces of the company. When he found none, so this is good. This thing with his hair was a little confusing. And flipped his light brown hair out of his eyes. They darted quickly into the darkness behind her, looking. So I could tell that you're basically using his hair, I think, as they darted quickly into the dark, looking for traces. No, it's looking for his eyes. Ricky grinned and flipped his light brown hair out of his eyes. They darted quickly into the darkness behind her, looking for traces of company. I get what you're doing, but it's a little confusing because you're like, they, even though you just referred to Ricky. So I think this is just rewording. Most women found him attractive. And almost this part, like, this could be condensed into one sentence to get the same point across. But then this gets to the next part, right? And I think this is good that you kind of had the setup of like, oh, okay, so he's attractive. Alara might be into him until he opens his mouth. You're like, yeah, who hasn't dealt with that type of asshole before? And this is good. The kimono is pretty. Yeah, and I think just it would just be a lot of line editing. Those battery operated boyfriends are real clutch hardware. Are a real clutch hardware for cougars like you. Like, this is just such like a good, like, this showcases his personality in one line, one piece of dialogue. And you could almost have him start with this even before some of these descriptions of him, and this would get across the point of what of who he is. This is a great example right here of showing and not telling this specific line, especially for a supporting character who might not even be a part of the story. So great example of this. And then this is going through here. And then this makes sense. Icky Ricky. This is funny because you make her sexuality as such an undertone as part of this. I think you can clean this up just a little bit. I love the Icky Ricky part. It would just be doing some line editing. Don't you want to know what's inside the envelope? Bitched. My only thing with this, with him whispering bitch, was if he hissed it under his breath and the door's closed, would you still really hear it? It could go either way. I almost think that don't you want to know what's inside the envelope? I kind of went back and forth on if he mutters under his breath. I honestly would even have it be as under his breath. If the door's closed, then he's probably just whatever. Laura walked in the small kitchen. Good. God, I absolutely love the descriptions. She shook out the remainder of the dream from her hair. And it's like something about that line, like on one hand, that shouldn't make sense, but it does. That made sense to me. She shook out the remainder of the dream from her hair. For me, that gives me the perfect description. She's basically messing with her hair and she still has the dream on her mind. I think that's a great example. Great job. Let's see, shimmer like moonlight. Yeah, it's just your descriptions are amazing. And once again, I think Isabella, for me to give you the best feedback, I think it would just be going line by line, which I clearly don't have time to do on a live stream. But I want to highlight one other thing, which I think was a huge opportunity. The only other piece of the Orpheus section. When I think of Orpheus and the way she kind of looks at Orpheus, so I know Greek mythology is such an undertone of your world. It is such an undertone of the entire story, which is amazing. I love Greek mythology. When she first whispers Orpheus, I would maybe give like a brief little sentence on who is Orpheus or who is he to her, because she reveres him, which is amazing. Because my guess is a lot of the readers, maybe they've heard of him, but they might not know what his story is. So this is actually a test. If you're here in the live stream right now, throw a comment, either yes or no. Do you know who Orpheus is? And do you know what his Greek mythology story is? Yes or no, drop a comment right now. I'd be curious because this will be a good test for you, Isabella. Do you know the character Orpheus? Yes or no? Drop a comment. I didn't before I did. Exactly, right? My guess is that readers probably aren't, they probably heard of him, but they're probably not going to be familiar with his story, which is why I think even some type of brief description would help. Orpheus and Eurydice. Oh, John, another Greek mythology fan. Wonderful. Let's see. So I think I think clarifying him. Yep, Maammy Telly, and not really. Maammy Telly, heard of him, but don't remember his story. I know but not the story. Yep. So like once again, like most people are probably going to have heard the name, which is my guess, but they're not going to know his specific story. And this could be a subjective thing, but I still think it would be so powerful if when she first mentions Orpheus giving like a short sentence. Yep. And I actually, Orpheus, the story of Orpheus is one of my favorite Greek mythology stories. Real quick, if you're not familiar with the Orpheus story, Orpheus's wife dies. She's basically taken to the underworld by Hades. He travels to the underworld. Orpheus is one of the earlier Greek mythology stories where he travels through the underworld. He witnesses a lot of the other Greek mythological heroes who are trapped down there, but he's going to save his wife. He makes a deal with Hades. Hades says you can keep your wife, or he says you can bring your wife back to the real world, but you cannot look back at her until you leave this realm. So Orpheus leaves. He travels back to the real world with his wife trailing behind him, calling out to him throughout, knowing that he breaks the deal if he looks back at her. He makes it through the whole thing. He finally gets to the stairs back to the real world. She calls out his name once again. She says something which I believe disrupts him. He turns around. She becomes like this ghastly thing and disappears. And that is the tragic tale of Orpheus. Ah, love the story of Orpheus. So yeah, so I would say like even like a brief description of Orpheus and yep. I think something like that would be perfect. That's where Disney stole the idea for that. Yep. Because as we know, Disney doesn't steal the ideas for anything. Oh man, yeah, I completely agree, Bethany. It's funny. And then I think that with this Orpheus bit, I think it's interesting, but I think doing that setup will help. But I think it's cool that he kind of looks to her as or that she looks up to him as kind of this god. Isabella, I don't know if you're familiar with Phantom of the Opera, but that's kind of that same like connection that makes sense to me. The same way that the main protagonist kind of reveres the Phantom as this kind of like mythical god. That's kind of like the same sense that I get from this. Now, I think what I'm not sure is whether or not these gods are real in this world or whether or not it's just an idea. But I think that doesn't have to be described now. I think it's early enough in the story that it works as foreshadowing. So, yeah, and that was the other thing that I wanted to touch upon. And that's all that I got for you. Really great work. Really, really great work, Isabella. Really great excerpt. I definitely had a lot of fun reading that. Your storytelling is always so poetic. Okay, awesome. So some really good sections there. And then let's see, let me pull up. So reading number 2, I got Miss Anne Thornley-Brown. So Anne, I got your story on deck. I know I just saw you drop a comment, so I know you're here in the stream. Give me just a moment and let me pull up your story. But I got your story here on deck. Aw, anytime, Isabella. You rock. You're an awesome writer. I appreciate you. All right, and so I'm pulling your story up on deck. And in the meantime, make sure that if you want your story read, to send an excerpt to thecreativeghostwriter@gmail.com. It's down in the ticker below. So make sure you go check that out so that way I can get your story. All right. And by the way, if you found any value out of the stream so far, or you enjoy this experience, if you're on YouTube, tap the subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, Twitch, X, or LinkedIn, hit that follow button because you'll be alerted when I go live daily. Monday through Friday, Casual Writers Group with Kauffman Writes. Saturday, our Story and Critique Show. And then Sunday is our professional Creative Right Now video podcast. So make sure you're notified, and that way you'll know when I go live. I do the streams, I do weekly videos and short form videos to help make you a better writer. All right, and let's see. I got your story pulled up right here. Let's see where it go. I had your story pulled up. All right, perfecto. Here we go. Awesome. All right, and it looks like you got some more validation, poetic and pleasant to listen to, and also good story. Completely agree. Thanks for sharing, John. And I got you here. Bethany, are you doing something special for Mother's Day writing stream? Wise for Sunday? You know, Bethany, that's a great question. This year, I'm not. I went back and forth on this, right? I went back and forth for a while on, do I do something special for Mother's Day? And I was like, because I had set up an interview for tomorrow for the Creative Right Now podcast, when I was thinking of like, is there something that I can do for writers? I did come up with an idea though. And weigh in on if y'all would enjoy this. So at the end of our Sunday Creative Right Now podcast, we always do a free write exercise. If y'all end up joining tomorrow, we could do a special free write exercise that we could do as a little storytelling gift. We could do it. It'll just be like a short free write. We're going to do it for 20 to 30 minutes. We'll do a picture and you can give that story to your mom as just a very informal gift of something that you wrote for her. That could be something cool that we could absolutely do. So Bethany, that was a great question. Thank you for asking. That was kind of my idea right now, simply because I didn't package an entire stream specifically for Mother's Day. So yeah, but if that's something that y'all are interested in, well, we can absolutely do that as our like live writing exercise tomorrow, right after the podcast. And that'd be something super easy that you can write and then you can read to your moms. Like your moms will hopefully probably love your writing regardless, but we can write something that's specifically catered towards them. So I think that would be super cool. All right, wonderful. And I got your story all pulled up. All right, so let's see. Okay, so with Anne's, we actually have something really cool here. Let me first share the blurb about what the story is about. All right. So the story is called Seasonal Sisters. It's a nearly 100,000 word women's fiction. This coming-of-age story explores the strained relationship between two sisters, the daughters of Jamaican immigrants, amid family secrets. Depicting the challenges of a stable, middle-class family, it cuts through prevailing stereotypes of urban, low-income families. After reacting differently to racism in their predominantly white Montreal community, emotional and artistic Darlene Dashwood and her more reserved sister Cerise drift apart until a family crisis forces them to resolve their differences. When Darlene is about to graduate from CEGP Junior College, she is devastated when her friends object to her budding interracial relationship with Carl Mackenzie. Then, her pastor blows up at her when she shares her concerns about his racially insensitive sermon remarks. When Cerise assumes she must have been rude to the pastor, Darlene is deeply hurt. 2 years later, her resentment grows when Cerise never apologizes, even after a similar experience with the pastor. After they move away from Montreal, the chasm between them widens. Their relationship becomes seasonal: Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. A series of bizarre and confusing relationships with men exacerbate Darlene's youthful insecurities. So that's the quick little blurb about that. What's going to be cool about this excerpt? So Anne wanted our help with determining. So she has the story written already, and she's provided two different openings. We have an experimental opening and then the original opening for it. She needs our help on which opening sounds better based off feedback that she's received from, it sounds like, from other editors or another agent. And as we know for our stories, the opening is so critical. If somebody chooses to read your story because you bought them in through the cover art, the opening, the first couple chapters, is your chance to hook them into the story. So the opening is absolutely critical. And I think this is a great experiment for us to help her out with. All right, Anne. So I got this set. So I've separated, we have the experimental opening, and then I'll go through the normal opening. Actually, let's actually do the normal opening first. So this is the current opening that's in the story, and then we'll do the experimental opening. And I, of course, want all y'all to weigh in and let me know which one you prefer. Okay. Seasonal Sisters. Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Good Friday, 1974. Darlene's hands trembled as she helped her mother set her family's brunch on their Formica kitchen dinette. The pastor's scathing words still echoed in her mind. After the family assembled at the table, her father said the grace. Even though Wesley had migrated to Canada 18 years earlier to study at McGill University, his speech retained its Jamaican cadence. For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. Darlene's lips quavered as she joined her family for the Amen. The escovitch fish, lovingly prepared by her mother, was crisp and garnished with a colorful medley of onions, scallion, and red Scotch bonnet peppers over red snapper. Although Darlene usually looked forward to these seasonal dishes, she had little appetite for it. In the false promise of spring, the sun streamed through the window. It stroked the buttercup yellow walls, causing them to glow. Yet the warm ambiance failed to lift her spirits. Her temples still throbbed when it was time for dessert, the bun and cheese. Her mother sliced the bun imported from Jamaica's Hannahtown bakery. What's wrong, Darlene? Darlene moaned. I still can't believe the pastor blew up at me in his study. What did he say? He sprung to his feet and shouted, "How could you think of me? I'll have to raise this with the church board. Everyone knows I'm a liberal." Can you believe it? Her 16-year-old sister, Cerise, snapped, "You must have been rude to him." Darlene shot her sister a dirty look. "I was not." Instead of the bun, her mother passed a plate of exquisitely iced bunny chick and egg-shaped sugar cookies to her younger daughter. "Cerise Dashwood, if you can't think of anything appropriate to say, please confine your remarks to the weather." As usual, Cerise withdrew into her shell of silence. Darlene smirked. How could two sisters be so different? How could anyone dislike Jamaican cuisine? Her father reminded her, "We were never in favor of you girls switching to that conservative church. We feared something like this might happen." Despite the sweet aroma of raisins, nutmeg, cinnamon, and allspice, Darlene barely tasted her Easter bun. As soon as the wall-mounted rotary phone rang, Cerise sprung up and grabbed it. She held out the receiver. "It's Carl Mackenzie again." Terror gripped Darlene's chest. She shook her head frantically and mouthed the word. Cerise rolled her eyes. "I'm sorry she can't speak to you now." Pearl asked, "What exactly is going on between you and Carl? You used to be inseparable." Darlene grimaced. "Oh, nothing of significance." "Don't you see him every day at CEG at Segep?" Her mother probed further. Darlene didn't answer. She had a serious crush on Carl. Our relationship is too confusing to explain. Glossary Segep is a junior college system in Quebec. It's an acronym from the French term Collège d'enseignement général et professionnel, which means general and professional teaching college. In Quebec, Canada, it's a public school that provides the first level of post-secondary education. And as a note, this would probably be formatted in the footer of the page, as we see with storytelling sometimes. So great work. Cerise munched on a cookie. "Don't expect me to keep running interference for you." "Then stop grabbing the phone every time it rings. No one appointed you as the Dashwood family telephone operator. Enough!" Wesley scolded. Darlene was ready to rip her sister's head off. Cerise was 2 years younger, but showed her absolutely no deference. To avoid an argument, she turned to her father. "Daddy, may I please be excused?" "Yes, you may." Darlene grabbed her plate, glared at her sister, and made a beeline for her bedroom. Ever since her family moved to the apartment 10 years earlier, her room with walls and a radiator in a flamingo hue was her sanctuary. In fact, she'd selected the color herself. She opened her portable record player and slipped a 45 RPM on the turntable. The lyrics of Shame and Pride, the reggae hit by the Mighty Diamonds, expressed her confusion about her relationship with Carl. Shame and pride is killing you, girl. Remember in school how we loved each other? I used to see you wait by the schoolyard gate. Yeah, now we've grown up. Something seems to be wrong. By the time she curled up on the window ledge, the clouds covered the sun, and the swirling snow shook the barren branches. As the tears streamed down her cheeks, she nibbled on her cheese. Why did the pastor shout at her? Was Carl sending her mixed signals, or had she mistaken his overtures of friendship for romantic interest? Why did Cerise automatically assume she was wrong? They used to be so close. She shivered and covered her legs with her fuchsia fleece throw. The softness provided some comfort. Okay, so that's the end of the first excerpt, or that's the end of the original opening. We're going to now go to the experimental opening. Experimental opening, A Tapestry of Seasons and Seasonings, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Stouffville, Ontario, Canada. Monday, Thursday, 2020. Darlene Dashwood was livid. She grabbed the receiver and frantically pressed the buttons for her sister's Atlanta number. As soon as Cerise answered, Darlene exploded. You have gone too flippin' far this time. How dare you tell our family and friends? I'm overreacting, and Zoltan is no threat. Calm down. No, I won't calm down. Darlene leaned forward in her chair. Ever since the pastor blew up at me when we were teens, you've always assumed I'm wrong. That's not true. And you never apologize even when you're wrong, Cerise sighed. What makes things worse is Mom telling everyone her nephew is staying with her. He's virtual family. Zoltan is no nephew. He's our aunt's stepson and a grifter. Well, Mom considers him to be her nephew. Oh, stop indulging in mother's delusions. When you learn how to treat your real family, maybe then we can talk about virtual. Well, as I predicted, he's milking mother for money. Oh no. Darlene grabbed her mobile phone from her desk. I just got a text message from her bank manager, he said. Your mother comes in every day with a white guy. Zoltan! There's more. And his dog. Every day, your mother withdraws $100 to $400 for groceries. When she allowed Zoltan and that nasty dog to move in with her, I knew something like this would happen. He's taking advantage of her dementia. Exactly. It continues. As a result, her checks are starting to bounce. Now, will you take my concerns seriously? What do we do now? If we move mother to extended care, we can break her lease and Zoltan will have to leave. That small residence near her church is perfect for her. They don't have a full-time doctor and nurse. They have medical staff on call. That's not good enough. Another bonus is that the owner is West Indian. Mother can get Jamaican food sometimes, and that's important to her. Cerise kissed her teeth. That's important to you. No, Cerise. It's also important to mother. Just because you don't value our culture or like Jamaican food doesn't mean we should deprive her of it. She needs to be in a bigger residence like Fulford with more staffing. The bigger residence, the greater the risk of COVID. Fulford hasn't had any COVID-19 cases yet. There isn't enough programming. She brought in external recreational staff before COVID, temporarily stopping. That was a wise precaution. Staff going from residence to residence is what's spreading COVID-19. Well, I have concerns. Darlene rolled her eyes. When you get to the pearly gates, St. Peter will say, well done, child. Enter into thy rest. And you will respond, but I have concerns. You always have concerns. No need to be sarcastic. We're never on the same page. Italics. We're never on the same page. Well, you created this problem because you wouldn't back me up. Now you fix it. Darlene slammed down the receiver. Not even a year later, Darlene read a disturbing headline on the Montreal Gazette's website. After COVID-19 ravages Montreal seniors' home, Fulford residence to close after more than 150 years. Italics, exactly as I feared. We dodged a bullet, but Cerise will never apologize. Why does she always assume I'm wrong? We used to be so close. End second excerpt. Okay, awesome. So it's interesting. There were parts that I liked of both excerpts. I think from an overall storytelling perspective, the original opening is stronger, and that's specifically because I'll throw this one up. The original is better because it does more service to world building. It does more service to the character development and the world building, and the structure's a little stronger. The second portion is much more heavily reliant on dialogue. It's focusing on dialogue and plot to drive the narrative. Now, this could be because you're still working on setting up the second one to see if it's a better option. Because I know you had shared that you received feedback the first one wasn't the strongest opening. I think the real opportunity, and I think something that I would actually recommend, would be combining both of them to some extent. So let's start with the current opening. Let's see how far we can get. So I think what really works with the current opening is we're grounded in a very like general family sense. They're having their family dinner. We're getting an introduction to the characters. We get an introduction into the protagonist, Darlene, Cerise, her sister, the mom, and the dad. So we get an introduction into all four of them. And I think that's what makes the piece stronger. Whereas the second version is specifically highlighting around Darlene and her sister, Cerise, their two character developments. I think the first one feels a little bit normal. However, I think the opportunity for it is that it's a slow start. The reason the second one is stronger is because there's more action that we're sharing through the dialogue. The reason the first one is stronger is because there's more world building and overall description that brings the reader fuller into the story. So something that I would actually recommend, and this is just a random idea, if you want to combine the two, I would almost recommend, what if you started the original one with Darlene on the phone? And I think what I wasn't clear on was who she was speaking to. It was Cerise. So she was talking to Cerise. Cerise side. I just want to make sure that I read it correctly. Yeah, so it was that she was talking to Cerise, and they're talking basically about Zoltan. So what if we start off Darlene on the phone on the original excerpt, but you start her off at like near the end of a conversation? And I would say have her talk to somebody else that's not her sister, maybe another friend, and have her start off maybe talking about Zoltan and like putting her mom away in COVID-19. Even if you just do a couple lines as Darlene's like frustrated about her mom. She mentions COVID-19. That would actually be a better setup. Because I see it, because you set them in different years. Gotcha. Okay. I think that was something. So this was 1974. The second one was the year 2020. Gotcha. So then the overall story is skipping around in time periods. Okay. I see what you're saying. I think I would start the year in 2020, in all honesty. The reason being is because COVID-19 as a worldwide event is something that every single reader has experienced. It creates an easy connection of something that will automatically resonate because people know what it feels like to have gone through the COVID pandemic because it just happened. So I would start this in the year 2020. I think that's a great call. I would started out with them talking about the mom. Now, if this throws off the plot in terms of them talking about the mom or about her wanting to have the mom put away and mentioning the Zoltan character, then I would just adjust it slightly. But I think it would be really strong if you started off with maybe like half a page worth of dialogue, and make sure to add some descriptions in there, and do the original opening, start off with some dialogue, and start off with the phone conversation of maybe Darlene frustrated or upset. And that way she could be talking to somebody else. Then you could cut off the conversation with her being called to dinner. Maybe she's interrupted by Cerise, who Cerise like pushes past her or something that then cements us in this family dinner. I think starting this off with action would actually make this original with this original opening stronger, because right now it's just a slow start, which there's nothing wrong with it. But for me personally, I love stories when they start off with something impactful, because you want to think about like, what is the hook? What is the one hook? And like, I'll throw myself up here. Pro tip: if you're working on a story, just like if you're thinking of like clicking on a YouTube video, if you're thinking about reading a book, if you're thinking about watching a TV show, you check it out because the hook of the picture, your story is the same exact thing. If they've already been hooked in through your cover art and they're going to read it, you need to hook them in the first couple pages. And you want to ask yourself, what is the hook that a reader will be engaged with that will make them want to keep reading? And that's why I personally like to generally start stories with some type of bang something. So I think that's a great question to ask yourself. And I could see the hook being maybe this part of the conversation. Absolutely. Let's see. And then let me check on some of the comments. John, so yeah, and I think, John, you touched on a good point for the second one. I think because it was so dialogue heavy, you were doing a lot of telling over showing. And I think that was why I was trying to like, I got a little lost. I was trying to understand what was going on. But the first one, it was kind of clear. Let's see. Look at the conflict. Yeah, and Atomic, you're basically saying on the same things that I had touched upon. That absolutely. I think this is a good call out, right? So your descriptive language from the first one is really good. And I think that's what works so well in the original. I feel like slugging through a lot of description before getting to the action. Yeah, and I think it's, once again, it's because it just needs to start with something. I think in the original, you use a lot of descriptions on the family, the food, the family table, which I think some parts of it are a little unnecessary. I think I would rather, because this is the beginning, I would rather like cut down on just some of the descriptions, some of the food. Like the food, it's interesting, but you want to think about like, what is the action? What's the thing that's pulling the reader in? And I think of the original scene, what intrigued me the most was the fighting between the sisters, and then the mom and the dad trying to like intercede. The phone thing was so interesting. I love that. And then you kind of see that dynamic. That is fun. I want to get to those moments faster. And then intersperse the food, the table, and the setting a little bit more. But yeah, I would like do the setting in like a paragraph. If you don't go with some type of action that you'd start the scene off with. Let's see. Let's see. And then what else do we got? In the false promise of spring, her temple still thawed when it was time for dessert, the bun and cheese. Yeah, so it's like once again, like little descriptions like this, like they do work. I'm not actually opposed to this. In the false promise of spring, the sun streamed through the window. It stroked the buttercup yellow walls, causing them to glow. I like that. That's like a nice little description. Yet the warm ambiance failed to lift her spirits. I think this is a good little description. I'm fine with that. But almost like have this a little sooner, because this kind of sets the precedence for the room that they're in. You set the family setting. Let's see, in the crisp. Yeah, and I would just cut down on some of the food descriptions. And I would almost think it might be more powerful if you're just starting at them, they just finished dinner and going in a dessert. And that's specifically more for like a comment and just saving for a timepiece. Because the question is like, why have them sit through, or why share the reader in the two separate portions of the meal? Because it just feels like it's drawn out. I would rather them get to the fighting a little sooner. Because this is interesting. This is the plot, right? This is the first time that the plot is the pastor blowing up at her. I want to get to this portion a little sooner. And this is great. This is perfect. Oh, and just as a side note from a structural thing, this could just be because this could be up front because I put it in Google Docs. But just make sure that you're indenting the beginning of paragraphs. I'm pretty sure that's a standard. I'm almost positive that's a standard. I've seen more and more stories where they don't. So I'm actually questioning myself if it is. Yeah, so I usually use tab, but you can auto indent. Yeah, for APA style. Yeah, so indent the beginning of each of your paragraphs. That's just a formatting standard. You talk about this. I think I loved all the back and forth with the siblings. That was great. That was the highlight. Let's see. So Atomic and John, you guys are having a really great discussion. I just want to touch upon it real fast. So what we're doing is we're talking about what was it? If you're doing a period piece, if you're ever doing storytelling, or if you're ever doing a story that could be offensive, especially historically, right? Like the way that LGBT people were viewed, commented on, the way that people of color, absolutely, the way that so many people have been negatively harassed and racism and all those things. If you have anything in your writing that's going to be potentially offensive, or you're going to be using intense language, the right way to go about it is just make sure that you're heading at the beginning of the book, you're giving it a trigger warning. What you don't want to do is, people are more likely to be upset if they go into a book that's unexpected and then they're triggered through all these things that are said. However, if they go into it and they're aware that, hey, there's going to be trigger warning, there's going to be this type of cussing, this type of language, and you would do that at the beginning of the book, they're going to be more okay with it, because then you've let them make the choice to read the story, as compared to you choosing what happens to them. So it's literally all just about communicating it effectively, right? If your story, like, you can write stories authentically that cuss a lot, that use language that's very specific to the timepiece. You just have to make sure that it's clear to the reader, right? Because there's a readership for everything. There absolutely is. But clarity and communication is the win. Absolutely. Atomic John, thank you guys both for weighing in on that. That's an absolutely really important discussion, especially on period pieces. Let's see. I intend. Okay, cool. So then it was just because I switched to Google Docs. That's good to know. Perfect. Let's see. Sure. What other things? Our relationship is too confusing. Yeah, and I don't think there was like a specific part about it being offensive, but I think what they were talking about is more that period pieces are very difficult to tackle, because a lot of the times they can be offensive, especially based on whatever time period that you're talking about. They can just be difficult to navigate. So I don't think there was a specific part. Even as I read through it, I don't think there was any part of this portion that was offensive at all. But I think it's just something to be aware of as you're working on it, that like if you're talking about a specific issue with any marginalized group, or especially like anything having to do with racism, that it could be, you just have to be aware of how it's going to potentially trigger people in this day and age of the internet, right? You know what the internet is like. You see what people are like. So you just have to be aware of what you're writing, and then clear of how you're communicating that value proposition on the front end. And then I wanted to touch on the second part. So after the dinner scene, I touched on those. Don't expect me to keep running interference for you. And this is when she gets up. And this is good. This is actually a good transition. I actually liked this. After the dinner that worked because it's transitioning out. She's giving like the glare to the sister. And then you go and set up her room, which is great. And I had to say, I loved the record player. I like absolutely loved it. That was great. That was actually good for that time period. I wish I knew the song Shame and Pride. When I know a song, I can sing the lyrics because I know the melody. But if I haven't heard it, I'm just like, all right, I'll do my best. I was like, I don't know if reggae is one I can do or not. I haven't tried it. The pastor will make offensive remarks. Yeah, so then I think with something like that, then I think you just give a trigger warning at the beginning of the book, right? And usually authors will do this during the foreword. You write a foreword for the book, right? That's the industry standard. During the foreword, you include, hey, this is who I am. This is what the book is about. Just be warned. If it touches upon this, and this, it uses this type of language. I want you to know beforehand that this could offend potential readers. And usually publishing houses will actually have a standard for this if depending on the type of material, if you're going the traditional publishing route. Great question, by the way. Let's see. I love the use of music. So music and melodies to tell the theme is absolutely a great strategy. I love this. I feel like this is a thematic undertone. My recommendation with this portion, when she gets to her thoughts, so and I can go back and forth on this, and a lot of the times we don't want to pose too many questions to a reader at the same time. A best practice is to only pose one question, so that way we let the reader dig through the line of thought and understand whatever the problem is that the character's going with. Now, I know that the character is overwhelmed. She's dealing with all of these things. Why was Carlson or had she mixed for romance? She was wrong. And I think I might have missed this. Was the pastor, was that Carl? Was Carl the pastor? That could have been me that I missed it. Yeah, I think I just missed. I think Carl's the pastor, so maybe that's besides the point if they're all touching on the same thing. Yeah, so I would literally just drop this down to one question and then have the rest be her like thinking through that specific question, instead of doing multiple questions, just so you don't chance losing the reader. Awesome. Yeah, and then like I know we didn't really go through the experimental version too much, but like I said, it's just more the interracial. Okay, so the Carl was the interracial relationship. Yeah, so I would focus on one problem at a time. Pose the question, focus on the one problem, let her explore that through interiority, and then go into the next one. I always like to intersperse problem, interiority, action, problem. So that way you can let the reader go through the one problem. If you pose multiple questions, the reader might potentially, they might get confused or it might make them lose interest because we want them to focus on what's the one problem, at least in that current point of the story. The imposter is Pastor Willington. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and that's totally fine. I don't think having to use specific names is too important unless you're like talking about a character a lot and you're specifically referring to them. But I think that's fine because you're referring to them as the pastor. I think basically when you're referring to the relationship to Carl, I just don't know who Carl is as a reader. You might have touched upon it, but because you're referring to the pastor in the dinner scene, I actually had assumed that the pastor and Carl might be one and the same. So I think I could have just missed that because I'm doing it live, but I would just make sure you clarify the Mighty Diamonds expressed her confusion about her relationship with Carl. Cool. Yep. So you had said it right there. Gotcha. Okay. So now I see what's up. So it's because you go through Carl. This whole portion's about Carl. That's why it threw me off, because you have the thing about Pastor in between all the stuff about Carl. So if this whole section's about Carl, I would just cut the Pastor part out and have this stick specifically to Carl. And then instead of phrasing this as a question, I'd be like, Cerise always automatically assumed she was wrong. They used to be so close. And I think that just could make it a little stronger. Yeah, and then if you go with the experimental, I would just be adding more description. If you go with the experimental version, I'd add more description and add more a little more world building, because right now the experimental version, you're just doing a lot more telling over showing because it's heavily plot focused. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. I would say combine the both of them because there's strengths to both. So, but yeah, that's all that I got for you, Anne. Like overall, that's like, it's a really interesting setup, and I'm really I'd be really eager to kind of see like just like how intense this gets to and how this is going to explore themes which are very, very hard hitting, right? And we have to remember as writers, like if we're writing stories that are historically correct, right, and that we want readers, that we want them to feel that the emotional intensity, like those are good things to touch upon because they start conversations which can be productive, right? We just have to be clear about our intentions. Absolutely. Rough to add details to phone. Yeah, and I mean, like you don't have to add details to the sister, but like things that you can do is like what are like actions that your main that Darlene is taking, right? So if she's on the phone, what's she doing while she's on the phone? Is she playing with her hair? Is she sitting out the window? Is she staring out the window? What's going on outside? Usually the good thing with phones is like maybe she's pacing around the room. If she's on the phone, have her like, what if she goes and picks up a picture and she's like looking at something that reminds her of the relationship? What if she plays the music low? There's so many things you could do with it. It just really comes down to how you want to experiment with it. But usually, like if you're highlighting the phone, if you want to highlight the sister, then the description would be things that she'd look at that would remind her about the sister, or maybe things that like maybe she has something that she's fidgeting with. That would be my suggestion. Yeah. But yeah, that's all that I got for you, Anne. I think that was once again really interesting, and like thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that feedback was able to help you out a little bit, and like good luck as you get this to like whatever version you go through, and definitely keep us updated. Let us know what you end up deciding to do. And like by the way, like the fact that you wrote a near 100,000 word story is like really great work. You are so much farther ahead than so many people out there, and like you should be so proud of what you've put together, what you've written in your journey, and I'm eager to see it get published. So good luck with the journey, and thanks for trusting us to come share your story today. All right, and let's see. So reading number 3, Maammy Telly. I got your story on deck, Maammy Telly. Story number 3. All right. So let me tell you, while I get your story queued up, let me pull up. Got a quick little ad. Are you looking for a writing coach? So I've actually just made a super easy thing over on Fiverr. You should go check it out. And I've actually dropped the price just a little bit because I'm trying to figure out ways to be affordable for writers. But if you need a writing coach, go find my gig over on Fiverr. I'm starting at $35 for a 30-minute session. super cheap, where we'll basically dig into your story. We'll basically come up with a plan for what your story is. If you're struggling with outline, if you're struggling with procrastination, accountability, or any of the things, and give you a clear, concise plan to help you get through your story. Now, I usually suggest like either weekly or an every other week or a monthly thing. So that way, like I can help you be your accountability partner if you're struggling with writing, because accountability is a thing that a lot of writers struggle with. I would rather you write once a week than you write 0 times a month. So definitely check out my gig. I just threw up my Fiverr profile within the last week, so that way I could make my services a little bit more easier and bite-sized outside of my website that I advertise through the Creative Ghost. So just another avenue if you're searching for a writing coach. Let's see, Bethany, I definitely want to get your opinion on my opening. Yeah, absolutely. I would say just message me, Bethany, and we can like chat more. Let me know like specifically what you're looking for, and I would be so happy to help you out 100%. Absolutely. I know I've kind of created this thing as an open community discussion for us to be able to go through stories. A lot of the time, writers are fearful of putting their work out there and having other people hear it before it gets published. Understandable, which is why sometimes I think like if you fall into that category, writing coaching is perfect for you, because then you can still get feedback without feeling like you have to put it out. There's 2 avenues for it. As a writer, I'm not afraid of putting my stuff out there. Clearly, you guys have seen I've been writing now for 131 days back to back, and I like live stream everything. Clearly, I'm not worried. Like, my thought is like, if someone's going to steal my story, like I have proof that I've been writing it every single day. I can legitimately prove it. And I'm not worried. That just means that I have that good of a story. And I feel protected that I can prove my case. All right. And then let me get awesome. Maammy, Telly, let me pull up yours. Where'd they go? All right, Mama Talia, I got your story all set up here on deck. And Bethany, I hope I answered your question. But yeah, definitely just like message me and let me know what you want. And by the way, if y'all, Bethany, if yourself or if any other writers out there do want feedback on your story, and you're wanting it to be shown in the story and critique show, send an excerpt to the creative ghostwriter at gmail.com, which means I need to check my email. Oh, awesome. It looks like I got 2 more excerpts over here. Awesome. Perfect. And Bethany, that's absolutely a great strategy. So I've not been good with grammar and with very little mentorship. I'm like self-teaching. So I YouTube a lot of things between motivational and author inspiring tips. And like that's the way to do it, because formal education is expensive. I think there's definitely pros and cons to formal education. But if you're wanting to like improve your writing, like you gotta self-teach yourself. Self-teach. You gotta teach yourself a lot of the different aspects of like character development and world building and dialogue and grammar and all the little things. And you just learn step by step. Focus on one thing at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself, because what you don't want to happen is for you to like get inspired, get into it, and then get overwhelmed, get burnt out when life gets crazy. I am of the mindset focus on small things, so that way you can continue to grow week by week. Please post my LinkedIn. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Let me pull that back up. All right. So this was that was the Fiverr that I just posted. And then LinkedIn. If you want to check out my gigs on Fiverr, I just threw that there. And then you asked for LinkedIn. There's LinkedIn. Perfect. So there was the Fiverr gigs and then my LinkedIn as well. This currently streams to 5 platforms. So if you're from LinkedIn, welcome. Okay. So that was wonderful and awesome. So let us get to the next story. Maammy Telly, I know I saw you earlier. You're probably here in the stream. I'm pretty sure I saw your comments earlier. Yep. Okay. So let's throw this up. Bethany, that's a great question. So LinkedIn is another social media platform that focuses it's more on professional networking. A lot of people generally looked at LinkedIn as the social media platform for job hunting and networking with business professionals. It actually has an extremely high growth rate and is consistently undervalued. So I think LinkedIn has a lot of opportunities, but LinkedIn is like the more professional social media. So it's another great one if you're looking to like connect with like businesses. You see a lot more businesses on there, and especially a lot more people trying to get jobs. So great question. There are no bad questions. No bad questions. There are just questions that have that a lot more people may or may not be familiar with. All right. So I got you all set here, Maammy Telly. I got your timer on the clock. Okay. Crystals. Ain't that the truth? Trust me, guys. If you saw my early stories, you'd be like, oh, wow, he's a bad writer. Oh, it only took me, what, 15 years to get here? Writing's a process for sure. Okay. All right, Maammy Telly. So this is the second chapter of a previous story that we read from Crystals, which was inspired by one of our free writes we did. I want to say about a month ago. Okay. Crystals, chapter 2. One day before their 16th birthday, Danessa was sitting on the rough window ledge, staring into the fog that was covering the broken and deserted town. This was one of a dozen secret places the urchins had shown them, and they laid claim to this one since they did not want to risk anyone finding out the truth about them. They didn't have to worry much. The urchins got older and pretty much disbanded by this time, and almost all of them had left for better pickings. Only a few, like Mole, still lingered and scurried about, bothering them from time to time. King Wyatt's summer palace was now completed, and new housing and businesses were built closer to it, so this area was abandoned. The very few original residents who stayed in Old Town had pretty much died off rather quickly, but it was perfect for street rats, or as in their case, anyone with big secrets. The rooms Danessa and Jasper had taken as their own The rooms Danessa and Jasper had taken as their own were on the 3rd floor of one of the taller houses. The outside ladder was the safer way to enter, as the inside stairs had rotted here and there and were not very reliable. You could use them, but it would be taking a risk. It was also a good lookout. Danessa suddenly broke the silence. Do you ever wonder about our father? Jasper started. No. I guess not since we were kids. Why? What in the world made you think of him? I was just dreaming what he looked like. You favor Mother and Aunt Gwen. I wonder if I took after him. Wondering where we would all be if he were still alive. If he was like us. You know what I mean. If one of these crystals was his. Jasper put down his knife and carving and looked over at her. I guess we'll never know. I do remember one or two of the stories Mother told us, but after a while, I felt she was, well, just making it up. Like the fairy tales she told us to put us to sleep. I don't believe that. Mother wouldn't lie. I know she kept secrets, but I will never think of her lying to us. She only kept those secrets to protect us. Jasper sighed and went back to his carving. Secrets, he thought. Lying by omission is still a kind of lying. So I guess, like magic, there's good and bad in anyone. He wondered also what else may have been kept from them. He often felt that Aunt Gwen had not told all she knew. It was high summer, and King Wyatt was settled in a summer palace. There were parades and festivals for every phase of the moon. The king was said to be unconventional, but happy and wanted his people to love him, so he allowed them their gatherings and celebrations. But there was one thing he was very serious and passionate about, which gave him the air of eccentricity. He heard tales of magic orbs, and he was determined to have them, but he had no idea who had any, or even what they were really for. Everyone on his staff and in his guards tried to convince him they no longer existed, if indeed they ever really did. The closest to magic anyone knew of was the closest magic anyone knew of was herblore, which wasn't really magic of any kind, and even that was not practiced by many. As in any palace, there were spies. King Wyatt's was no exception. Some were spying on him, and some were spying for him. Some did both. Gareth was one who spied on the king. He was a man with a past that was better forgotten, but there were reasons he could never forget it. Reasons why the king needed watching. Gareth worked in the kitchens of the palace. He heard all the gossip from the staff, and when he went to town for provisions, he heard more from the townsfolk. He was kind and trusted by all. He made the best pastries and spent well in the market. When there were leavings, he gave them to the less fortunate, making his appearance a most welcome sight. The king's obsession with the crystals was growing each week. Wild ideas came to him, dreams of even more wealth and power. His every wish would come true. He would be able to transport himself anywhere he pleased at any time. None of this was particularly true, but the more he thought about the crystals, the wilder his ideas became. He began secretive consultations with his advisors as to how to find out where the orbs were and what witches had them. They had to be witches, didn't they? Magic always went with witches, but who could he trust? Who could he seek? Who could he send to seek them out? The advisors were at a loss. They didn't believe any of it existed, but did not want to get on the king's bad side. As kind and generous as he was to his people, he could be hard and almost cruel in private. One of his advisors suggested a special and very difficult contest so that whoever had crystals would have to use them. The king roared, "What pitiful idea are you trying to pass off? Of course they would not be used openly." "Sire, they have not been heard of in many years, and then only in legends," dared one of the advisors. That earned him a smack on the side of the head. "Nonsense! I know they exist. Have the guards examine every citizen if you must. Get them to talk. Someone must know. Pay special attention to the healers." So the guards went out to the towns, searching, asking, begging for any information about who might own the crystals or anyone who may be practicing magic. There was even a reward offered for any information. No one knew or refused to admit any knowledge. Many laughed and thought the king's desires were showing a decline in his mental capacity. They didn't want to be involved with the king's inspections, so whether they had crystals or not, the healers disappeared. They seemed to all have been mysteriously called away to other communities, or so they told the townsfolk. It seemed no one could or would help. That is until one old woman came into the tavern. "I know," she said in a voice that would scratch iron. Two guards had stopped in for a drink. They were the only patrons at the moment. They looked at the woman that looked at each other and had a silent conversation. "Do we give her the time of day and listen, or toss her out?" One guard shrugged. The other nodded. They were getting nowhere and becoming more desperate to not have to face the king with bad news. "Okay, old woman, what do you know?" "I know there was a family, a mother, her sister, and 2 children," she said, dragging out every syllable. "Well, what about them?" the taller of the 2 guards demanded. "Who are they, and where can we find them?" "Ah, that is a bit of a problem. I'm a bit dry. It's hard to remember. Perhaps you would be kind enough to offer to buy a poor old woman a drink?" Very well. Barkeep, pull one of my guests here, the shorter guard said with a touch of sarcasm. She took a long drink, then wiped her mouth on her ragged, filthy sleeve. Well, get on with it then. Yes, that does help. The mother and her sister are dead. The guards got up from the stools. No, hear me out. The children are alive. Theirs is one of the largest magical families for a week's hard riding or more. She smiled a near toothless smile. Their names. Where do they live? We don't have time for this. The tall guard stood over the woman. Their names are Jester. Oh no, that's wrong. I mean, Jasper. And let me think. The guards were getting very impatient. Out with it, or out with you. A little time now. Just give old Granny a minute. Perhaps it's my empty stomach that is keeping me from remembering. Now, if you could spare a copper for a bit of food. You give up the names and I'll buy you a feast, said the taller guard. The short one shook his head. She should get nothing but the wild goose she would have us chasing, if this is not true. Ha! Now I have it. Old Granny knows. Jasper and Delinda. Or is it Dorinda? Dorissa? No. She shook her head with her finger on her chin. Ah, Jasper and Danessa. That's lovely children. They must be near grown by now, though. Haven't visited him since they was, 11 years old or so. Used to bring him treats when I could. Oh, a long time ago. But I do just seize them now and again, but don't ever talk to them. Where can we find them? The guards were getting angry. I don't know exactly where they stay, but these ancient eyes seen them in the marketplace, helping themselves, if you know what I mean. What do they look like? The taller guard pulled a few coins from his purse. Oh my, let's see. He's almost as tall as you, but with lighter hair and eyes the color of acorn. Image of his mother, it said. Oh, the girl now, she's a delight of blonde, wavy hair, and her eyes, well, then seem to change. Bluish one day, and brownish or greenish another. There's magic in that one for sure. Good children they was, but full of mischief now. Again, she gave them a wink. Bet they's out there right now. Why would you tell us this, old woman? Why would you give them up to the King's Guard? The shorter guard was still skeptical of their information. You be asking, I be knowing, and I figured you'd pay handsome like, yes? The short guard turned to the taller one. Humph. See just how fast a friend becomes your enemy with just the promise of a bit of coin. Let's look anyway. He tossed a few coins on the table and they left. The old woman snatched the money, laughed, and rocked in her chair. The marketplace was bustling, and each stall was full, bursting with their food, tools, clothing, and more. But it didn't seem to take long for the guard to pick out a boy and girl that seemed to fit the description the old woman gave them. Ragged and patched cloaks on both. The girl was distracting the shopkeeper just long enough for the boy to grab some bread. That fit. Jasper and Danessa saw the guards coming towards them and yelling for their captain. D, we need to split up. I'll go to Old Town and you head to the woods. Gareth was in the marketplace that day. He watched the mayhem with the others in the marketplace and silently hoped they could get away. Jasper and Danessa started to run, and the guards gave chase. End reading. Wow, that was a really good excerpt, Maammy Telly. That was a really good excerpt. I felt like I got a little bit more I got more world building in that, which I absolutely loved. You did a much better job of setting up the overall world. I would say the world was great. It's interesting. The character development was very, very interesting. So like these three things were actually my highlights. I love the dialogue between the woman, the old woman, and the guards. I think that scene really, really stood out to me. I think the biggest opportunity, at least right now from this scene, would probably be just some of the, I would say it would be some of the structuring, and then my question on the plot. And this, it could be intentional. So overall, like, I'm really glad to see this story coming to life. I think that's so awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. I like the beginning of the setup. So you start off with the urchins, and this gave me a little bit more when I know last time I didn't really get any description about them. So like now I'm actually clear and like, all right, the urchins, this framework, this is super cool. I think the only thing from a structuring perspective is you start off with the urchin and kind of where with Danessa, and then you hop into the King Wyatt, the summer, this business from the town. I would go about this one in two ways. You want to start off with the bigger world first. So you want to start off bigger, then go smaller. I would actually start with the summer palace first and then do the urchins. However, I don't actually think this section, the King Wyatt section, is important until after the Dinesh and Jasper scene. So I might even suggest like getting rid of this portion and then going straight into Dinesh and Jasper. And I like so like you're set. I love that you're setting them up. It's basically Dinesh and Jasper. They're staying at this place where urchins stay at, which is cool. Yeah, I would say it's because you're doing a lot of description, but there's not too much action happening at the beginning. So I think that's why Atomic brings up a good point. So like the description is great. I think what I would recommend is start off with this description, which works, but I would almost have like start off with Janessa and Jasper and Jasper, Danessa and Jasper, have them start like right in the middle of their conversation. Like, what if Danessa, you start off the chapter with Danessa with this right here. Danessa suddenly broke the silence. Do you ever wonder about her father? Or even I would do this, right? I would go, I'll just copy that. I would be like, do you ever wonder about our father? Danessa said as she suddenly broke the silence. And I would start the paragraph with this right here because this is clear, right? And this is some action. And then you could be like, oh, Danessa looked out the window at their home on the day before their 16th birthday at their window. And then you could use some of the description, right? Because now we're introduced to a little action and it gives us like a hook into the chapter. And I think that would actually make it 100 times stronger. And then you could do the description of the urchins. You probably cut down on the description like a tad, but overall, I don't have too many problems with this because I love that you're setting up. This is a huge location for them. And then the room. Yeah, so I think I would almost recommend like combine the room and the urchin one into one paragraph, shorten it just a little bit because I feel like you could probably describe both of those. I love that you talk about mole. I love that. I feel like this section about mole also like needs to come before the mole scene that you had previously. Because the mole thing's like just not relevant, at least to this specific chapter. There's that. But this conversation that they're having about the father, like this is good. This is like childish, like they're wondering. I would almost think it would be interesting. Like, what if she's like trying to play with the crystal or she's bringing it out and then Jasper, like it creates tension, right? Danessa brings out the crystal. Jasper like goes and takes it and like hides it or something like that. I think kind of having that, like maybe that subtextual, that undertone of the crystal as this element that's there could make the scene even more fun and kind of give them a little more action to play around within the scene. Because what they're saying is fine. I'm actually good with their dialogue in the scene. I think it's just highlighting a little more action. So that way it doesn't just feel like they're talking to each other only. Yeah, it's a ton of see. So I'd open with the King's Proclamation with some more action instead of just describing. Right. And you see, that's another way that you could go, right? So you could start with the King's Proclamation, and that would start it even more into the action. Yeah, I think that worked. That would be one opportunity. I could go either way, right? I could either start with the Danessa and Jasper scene or start with the King's Proclamation scene because that's huge, right? The king being upset. I could see that as well. And that I think that'd be a subjective thing, how you'd want to tackle that. Yeah, you're wondering how to fit in the king bits. Yeah, so it's like Atomic had a great idea. Like, start off the chapter with it if you want that to be like the main precedent. So because then that creates tension throughout the entire scene of like, oh, people are looking for them. And then it gives a reason why is Danessa sitting looking out the window. Because maybe they know, or maybe they don't know actually. Maybe they don't know that they're being searched for. But I think doing the king bit in the beginning would be one possible way. And it would make the overall scene flow a little smoothly. And then the granny scene. So yeah, I don't have any more recommendations for their talking scene because I think the talking scene is interesting. You're kind of giving them back a little backstory. Yeah, and I think they just need a little more action of things that they're doing while they're talking. Yeah, and just another just point of clarity. Just make sure you clarify who our main point of view character is here, because you start off with Danessa, so it feels like we're in her point of view, but then at the end you switch to a Jasper. Um, let's see, because you switch to Jasper's interiority, so it makes me think, oh, okay, are we in Danessa's head or are we in Jasper's head? And that's a really easy fix. I would keep the interiority either in Danessa or Jasper. I'd pick one of the two. But if you go with Jasper, then have it start off with him doing whatever he's doing with his carving as he sees her looking out the window. And it just makes it clear on whose point of view we're following. And then we go to the King Wyatt bit. Yeah, so then all like the stuff with the town, I think it would just be, I mean, you could go about it in one or two ways, right? You could either do the Danessa Jasper scene as their own chapter, and then you do the King Wyatt bit. Or you do the King Wyatt bit at the beginning, start off with his proclamation. Yeah, because you do a couple, it looks like you do a couple pages here about the king and Gareth and that whole portion. And I get the feeling that Gareth is probably an important character. I would think this is interesting. What I would do is I would just shorten the whole king bit, the description, and let the reader learn more about what's happening through through his dialogue. Because when the king's yelling to the servant, like, this is the most interesting part of the king portion. I want to get to this portion of the king section faster because this is like interesting. Like, you kind of describe him as this like loving and kind king, and then his dialogue is like, no, he's like, I off with your heads basically if you don't go get me that crystal. But I love it. It's good. It's good setup for this king. So I would just minimize the setup for it, and let us learn about what's happening through what he's saying, and then intersperse some of these details in between his dialogue. I think that's how I would actually fix it. Yeah, and this is interesting, right? So it's like Atomic, you were saying, but skip most scene with the granny, but show the children running away, then follow up with them coming back together in the hideout. Yep, I want to know. And then Bethany was saying she liked the granny scene. So we have two different points of views here. And that's why when I read the granny scene, I was mixed. I love the granny scene. I think she's a really interesting character, and her back and forth with the guards was really fun. I liked it. However, I think that my challenge is, how does this overall scene relate to the rest of the larger story? Doing such setup and description for the granny is only important if she's going to become a more predominant character throughout the story, which, like, I hope so. She's actually an interesting character. I hope the children have to like go work with her or something, because she's a really interesting character that you set up. If she's going to become a bigger, more predominant character, you could keep it. I would probably just cut down on some of the on just a little of the dialogue. You draw it out a lot. I would shorten the beginning and the end just a little bit so I get to the point. But her overall dialogue section was fun. I did like the granny and the guards. It's just a little too drawn out right now. But I think that was fun. Yeah, and I think what throws it off is because when we think about the section, so I think this is why structure is the biggest opportunity for this, because when we think about the way that it's laying out right now, here you go. I'll write this at the beginning. So this is the outline right now that we have of this section. I'll do this real quick. So right now we have the outline is we have Danessa and Jasper. We have a king scene. Then we have granny scene. Then we have Danessa, and then we have the runaway market scene. So right now, if I look at this from a structural perspective, this is the way that the scene's organized. You want to keep the Danessa and Jasper. You could technically intersperse it. There's no problem with that, but we want to think about whatever the overall plot is, right? So like if we do it like the king scene first, then we could touch upon Danessa and Jasper, but then it doesn't make sense for us to go to the granny scene unless Danessa and Jasper are somehow involved with it, right? Or you could go like king scene, granny scene, and then go Danessa and Jasper and do like this, but then them starting in the room and going to the marketplace. I think there's a number of ways you can go about it. And once again, Granny, Maammy, Telly, there's no wrong or right way to do it. It's entirely subjective. So I think you have a couple of options. If I was doing it like myself, if I was structuring this, I would go. I think I would start off with the king scene. I would start off with the king scene. And this is actually the way I would do it. So I would start off with the king scene. I would do Danessa and Jasper in the room. I would have the scene end with them leaving the room. I would do the granny scene, but I would change the point of view. I would change point of view from a street urchin, potentially like Mole, somebody else who's in the bar who is watching. Change point of view to Mole or street urchin. Because then this is closer related to Danessa or Jasper, whatever predominant characters, and then have this character be connected to Danessa and Jasper if Danessa and Jasper run into. Danessa and Jasper are informed by a street urchin or they run into them. I think that's how I would do this from a structural perspective. Or I would have Danessa and Jasper, one of them witness the granny scene, potentially. Yeah, I think like, and this is like a structural thing. Like I think I could play around with this of like, because you've kind of set up Mole to be like this kind of like two-sided character. Like if street urchins are kind of everywhere, it could actually make sense for one of them to kind of be like in the bar, like listening. And I think that would create a really interesting foreshadowing. I would be fine with that, whether it was Mole or whether it was another character. I think that would be interesting. You would just have to make sure that that character is connected and how that gets back to Danessa and Jasper. Of whether or not Mole goes back to them and is like, hey guys, this is what's happening. Or he's like, you guys are in trouble. Screw you guys. Give me the crystal or else I'm going to tell the guards. But maybe. Like you could play around with it in any number of ways. Kind of since you've set up Mole to kind of be maybe a little bit of a wishy-washy character. That's how I would go about it. Yeah. And like another way to go about it, Maammy Telly, is make the granny character an important character. She is super fun. Like make her a bigger character because I had a lot of fun reading her character. Um, make her a bigger character, and then have her somehow end up joining and working with the kids at some point. Like maybe Danessa and Jasper, maybe she has a stronger relationship with Danessa and Jasper and they end up going to her later and then being betrayed. So that would be another way that you could go about it. Yeah, and then this is like another intentional. This is another like with an intention question, right? So if the guards are worried about maybe losing their heads or the upset of the king, why would they put up with her antics so much, right? The granny kind of pushes them a little beyond their limits, especially if the king is basically threatening them with like off with your heads. So I think that's why I would just cut down in the beginning and the end because it's just a little too drawn out. I would agree with that. Okay, you redid Mole in chapter 1. Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So, Maammy Telly, I think that's all that I got for you. I think like once again, the overall feedback is it just needs to be restructured more than anything, and then refocusing so that way they're better connected as it pertains to the overall plot of the story. And I think it'd make it stronger because individually each of the sections had some really interesting things working and some things that did well for each portion of it. So that'd be my biggest recommendation, and that's all that I got for you. Thanks for bringing in the second chapter. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And it is my sincere hope that the granny becomes a better character. Or not a better, she becomes a big character. I'm hoping, but that's just a reader's wish over here. Thanks for sharing that, Maammy Telly. That was awesome. Okay, so hop into reading number 4, Torrent. Sean, I got your story here up on deck. Let me know if you're here in the stream. I got your Torrent excerpt coming up here. All right. And by the way, are you enjoying the show? Tap that like button. Let me know that you got value or that you're getting value out of this. So hitting the like button shows the algorithm, regardless of what platform that you're on, that then it puts it out to more people. So help me by hitting the like button. Thank you so much. Very, very much appreciated. And Sean got your torrent on deck. And hey, what's up, Sean? Glad to see you here. Welcome, my friend. Love it. I'm pulling your story up. It's Maammy Telly. You're saying there's a chase scene in chapter. Ooh, I love chase scenes. I hope you submit chapter 3 at some point because I love chase scenes. Chase scenes are a lot of fun. Because chase scenes are good like action scenes, and you can also do a lot of foreshadowing with chases. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Thanks for sharing. Okay. Sean, I got. Okay, so Sean, I went with the smart choice. Of pulling up your document in Final Draft this time. All right, so we decided to pull up. I was like, I stuck with Final Draft because I figured it would just be a little easier. Let's see, Torrent. Yep. All right. Perfect. Let's see. All right, yeah. So I was hesitant to do a Final Draft just because it screws up formatting when I double it up or when I try to space everything out, and then it doesn't look as good. But I wanted to stick with Final Draft because sometimes the PDF gets screwed up as well. I kind of go back and forth on the best version I like for scripts because I think if you've ever worked on a script before, not just you, Sean, but any of our other anyone else here in the audience, scripts is it's just a different format. Storytelling does not change. Storytelling stays the same. We're still focused on character development, world building, dialogue, plot, and structure. It just, like with different mediums, the way we're telling the story is different. Where with storytelling, we get to focus on description and interiority. Scripts, we focus on what I can visually see and dialogue. But storytelling is still the absolute same. Okay. Please have one of them singing. Chase sings while singing Chase sings. And there's going to be a song playing in the background. Say Paw Patrol. Chase is on the case. Oh my goodness. We're going to start having like, we're going to start having some rhyming over here going on. Yeah, go and stop chasing that. Go chase that rhythm. Okay. And like, okay, all right. I'm like, I need to like take a second because I already know, Sean, your script is like intense and thriller like, and I can't be laughing in like the serial killer script. Okay. All right. You know that moment, you know, like when you feel like you're trying to like not laugh and it just makes you laugh more. All right. I'm in. Like, scene end, scene begin. Ooh, okay. Whew. All right, Kauffman's back into it. Ready to read a dramatic serial killer script. Okay. All right. So if you haven't joined us on previous excerpt readings, this script, it's a really cool script. A lot of the sections we've read so far, this is definitely a thriller, serial killer type. So we're definitely flipping the script. We've actually had some really good variety of genres today. Very great variety. I love what we've gone through so far. I want to say, what was that? First one I would say was urban fantasy. I would say first one was urban fantasy. Second one was historical fiction. Third one was general fantasy. And then fourth one is thriller horror. I love the mix. Okay. So I'm all ready. Torrent. Pages 30 through 38. Excerpt. Nick sits parked in the street in front of the Garcia home. With his lights off, he watches as the three Garcia children are playfully chased around the family room by their mother, Marta Garcia, 29, an attractive woman who exudes charm, passion, and beauty effortlessly. As the mother tackles the oldest child, the other two dogs pile on top. The joyous laughs spill out through the front window into the neighborhood. Nick starts his car and places it in drive. Marta. Nick! Nick turns to see Marta on her front porch. She gracefully bounds down the stairs and runs to the passenger side of Nick's car. As she gets in, the rain beats harder on the windshield. Nick puts the car back in park and kills the engine. The two sit in silence. I'm sorry. I didn't want to bother you and the kids. Bother us? We miss you. Nick is taken back by her comment. The boys ask about you all the time. Tio this and Tio that. Do you want to come in and see them? Marta, I can't. Sure you can. We were just about to have dinner. Please join us. I'm sorry. The two sit in the storm, both waiting for the other to speak. Eventually, Nick breaks the silence. I really miss him, Marta. So do I. I swear I'm going to find him. You are a good man, Nick. How do you do it? Do what? This. All of this. I see how you are with the boys and... Dios mio, Nick. I fight to get out of bed every morning after crying in my pillow every night. But I do it because I have to stay strong for my boys. Nick takes all this in. Are you sure you don't want to come in? It's paella. I made too much. You're too kind. I should be heading home. Okay. Please don't be a stranger. You're familia. You know that, don't you? Nick nods. Marta exits the car and runs through the rain back to her porch. She turns to Nick as the boys come to join her. The whole family waves to him. He waves back, starts the car, and drives away. Interior, Billy's home. Night later. Billy sits on the couch, an arm around each boy, watching the local news on the television. Billy seems more interested than the boys. The boys pretend to be engaged. So, you boys excited about school tomorrow? Not really. Nope. The boys still stare blankly at the news on the TV, not acknowledging their father. Okay, ground rules for tomorrow. Come on, Dad. Dad, no. Turning off the TV. This is serious, boys. Billy's voice causes the boys to sit upright. First things first. What are we going to do? We. Yes, we. It's not like I don't have to try to make friends here, too. It's not the same. So the first thing is. First, I'm going to find a friend immediately. Exactly. And how do you do that? Find the quietest kid in class, since they'll probably be a loser. That should be easy for you. Losers always want to hang out with losers. Brad punches Eric in the arm. Guys, this isn't a joke. We have to try to fit in this community. And the sooner, the better. What if they know who you are? Is that such a bad thing? I mean, it's a great talking point to break down their walls. Use it to your advantage. Some advantage. Billy sits back on the couch, putting his arms around Brad and Eric. How was dinner? I've had better. Oh, you have you? Dad, can we have something different tomorrow? I think we should finish what we already have in the freezer, don't you? I guess. I'll tell you what. I'll see what I can wrangle up on the way home tomorrow after work. I miss Mom's cooking. So do I, Brad. So do I. The three sit silently as the anchorman's voice projects from the TV. Billy glances at both boys, who slowly become enthralled with the program. Exterior, Miss Summer's home, night later. Reverend Morrison steps onto the rain-soaked porch. He sets down a large cooler into a puddle as he wipes the water from his coat. He rings the doorbell and waits. Ding dong. Did somebody order a blessed dinner from the local parish? As the porch light turns on, Miss Summers opens the door. She has a smile plastered on her face. Oh, Reverend, you always seem to know when to stop by. Were you low on food? Oh, no, God forbid. Miss Summers looks at the large cooler sitting in the puddle on her porch. But your delicious food is always welcome. Miss Summers is lying, and they both know it. You are not the first to criticize my cooking tonight, Cynthia. Maybe I shouldn't have dropped out of culinary school. No, I didn't mean anything by that. Would you like to come inside? I wish I could, but I have other deliveries to make. If I don't get Vivian's dinner to her, she may break a hip dancing the jig. The Reverend chuckles at this. Miss Summers is not amused. So, you said something about I always seem to know. Yes, I'm sorry. My mind seems to get away from me these days. I just wanted to warn you about these gangs that are always coming around here. As you know, Cynthia, the church has reached out to many of them. If they don't want to change their ways, well, I saw them with guns earlier, walking up and down the streets. Deuteronomy 31:6. What? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord, your God, goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. So there's nothing you can do. I'm sorry, Cynthia. Have you contacted the police? What are they going to do? The same thing when my grandson... Miss Summers stops herself, lost in a memory. After a long break in the conversation, the Reverend glances at his watch. I have to go, Cynthia. Get yourself out of this rain and keep yourself safe. Miss Summers turns to head back inside. Wait, I almost forgot. Reverend Morrison reaches into his cooler and pulls out a couple of Tupperware containers. As he hands them to Miss Summers, he notices the loss in her eyes. Remember, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Ecclesiastes 3:1. Thank you, Reverend. That's just what I needed to hear. As Miss Summers shuts the door, the porch light goes out, leaving the Reverend in the darkness. He looks up both sides of the street before running to his car. Dream sequence. Interior Wallace's old house. Billy wrestles with Brad and Eric on the ground. The two boys tag team Billy as he tries to get back on his feet. They all laugh with delight. Diana Wallace, 34, a modern-day June Cleaver, giggles as the men in her life frolic on the ground. Billy stands in the hallway of his house. A shadow figure runs away from him. Billy fires his gun. End dream sequence. Billy jolts from his dream. Both boys, as well as both of Billy's arms, are fast asleep. He gently jostles his son's awake. Okay, it's time for bed. You both have a big day tomorrow. Brad and Eric groggily mumble as they stand and stagger towards their bedrooms. End scene. Thanks for sharing this, Sean. Once again, this one's a little bit more of a dramatic. I actually love Reverend Morrison. I think Reverend Morrison is my favorite character out of this excerpt. So you have a lot of things that are working really well. I think, so I would say right now, world building is working great. I'm pretty good with the dialogue. I like the dialogue and the world building. I think right now, the biggest opportunity is for the character development, not structure. And I would say suspense. Suspense would probably go a little bit maybe into plot. So I think character and plot are probably the biggest opportunities. Overall, though, I like what you're building up to. So we have this broken up into 3 sections. We have the Nick and Marta section. We really have the Billy and his sons. And then we have the Reverend Morrison and Miss Summers. I do. I like Miss Summers a lot too. I'm loving this character you're creating for Miss Summers. She's this like little old creepy serial killer. And like every single time you're around her, she's gonna like knife you. Like, oh my God. I'm loving what you're doing with the script so far, Sean. Okay, so let's hop into it. Let me just check comments. Yeah, and that's a good point. When as a teenager, one of the pastor wives said, we went to Africa as the missionaries, we worked as the N-word. If I included, I need a trigger warning. Yeah, and I mean, I think if you're using it as a one-time thing, but I think it's more like, if you're using it consistently throughout the story, I think that's when it really needs a trigger warning. Let's see. Okay, but I was distracted by the fact that she gracefully bounded down the stairs in the pouring rain. No umbrella. She's completely unfazed. So, okay. So this is a good call out for the Miss Summers and Reverend scene. Bethany, this is a great question. Let me get back to this in just a little bit. The genre question is a great one. I'll get back to it. Okay. So let's start off with the Marta and Nick scene first. Let me see. So Marta and Nick. So it's interesting. I think of the 3 scenes, this one, I was less intrigued by this scene of the 3 of them. So you can tell that Nick and Marta, like this is basically setting up like Nick's, his loving backstory. And I think once again, what I don't get from Nick in this is I kind of lost his anger completely. And I think because his anger is such a predominant part of his personality in the first couple excerpts, I think similar to the last excerpt, I want a little bit more of his kind of like abrasiveness. Um, Not necessarily directed at Marta, but more just in general. And I think that's what I'm kind of missing from his character development in this scene specifically. I like that Marta is like the kind, like the girlfriend. She's trying to like pull him back. And I think that's actually important. Like, I think you do want to show that, but I would recommend, Sean, show balance, show both sides, right? So like have Nick like when he thinks about like the partner, like I could almost see him as think about the partner of him being like banging on like him, like get upset and being like, let's see, him like having a moment where he's like, I've been through this and this and this, and I really miss him, Marta. And he bangs on the car. But then Marta kind of like calming, like, hey, we really want you. And to specifically show her calming him down. That would actually be more powerful because it would show how her specific actions bring him, like how much she actually affects him, because nobody else in the story has really had that effect on him. Um, Reverend Morrison a little bit, but Reverend Morrison is more on like a friend level, where you can tell that Marta is more on an intimate relationship level. And I actually think like showing maybe an outburst could actually be really powerful potentially. Um, Let's see. And I like that. And so I don't want to bother. And I think that would actually give the scene a little more action, because right now in the scene, there's just there's no action. And I think that's the problem with it. I don't get any, there's no action, there's no suspense. So you have to do something that's driving the scene. And I think that's what's missing from it right now. Hey, what's up, Merg? Welcome to the stream, my friend. We're just doing story readings and critiques. Feel free to sit back. We're just in the middle of a critique right now. Let's see. Sure you can. We were just about to have dinner. The two in the but I love, Sean, what I did was I love that you've set up all the background for all these scenes as this thunderstorm. I think that's actually brilliant. I love using weather as a backdrop for theme and suspense. So I absolutely love that. And then both wait for the other. And I would almost like if you're using the thunderstorm, I would almost have like this moment be the cackling of thunder, like a thunder, you hear thunder in the distance. And then Nick being like, I really miss him, Marta. Because it feels like something needs to set off him saying, I really miss him. Like, what is the thing that sets him off about it? Because this is like basically this is what's that? Not light talk. This is small talk. So like the first part is basically small talk. Yeah, so I mean, the first portion is basically small talk, and it feels like something needs to happen for him to say this. And I mean, like, it could be something as easy as a thunderstorm, or just them saying something, or him having an. No, I would say small talk. Yeah, I think I would go, if I was writing this, I would go small talk, outburst, and then missing him, because anger is his thing. Like, anger is clearly Nick's thing, and I would actually highlight that small talk, angry moment. Oh, because now he feels guilty because he cares about Marta. So that would actually make more sense for him to now be emotionally vulnerable. So I think that's how I would go about this. That's another option, right? You could use the subsiding of rain as an eerily suspenseful moment. Yep. I think that's a really great. I think that's a good idea. That's where I'm going to find him. You're a good man, Nick. And I think all this stuff is good. I think this is good. Marta's kind of showing him kind of how she deals with it. I like that. I think the only thing I'm unclear about, Nick turns to see, is the one thing I'm unclear about right now, Sean, is what is the specific extent of their relationship. I'm not sure. Are they casually dating? Have they kissed? Are they in an intimate relationship? Have they been together for a while? And I think that's what I'm missing from this specific scene. Now, you might set it up and there might be more of it throughout the script, but just from their actions, like I know they're in some type of intimate thing, but I'm not clear on the extent of their relationship. Because clearly she cares about them. They've clearly been through something. Uh, Oh, this is Fernando's family. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Okay, 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 okay. That makes so much more sense. Okay. That okay, that actually makes a lot more sense. That makes sense why he's there then. So logistically, and this is a question just to ask yourself, Sean, why is Nick there? Because basically he pulls up, she gets in the car, they talk, she asks him to come in, and then he's like, no, and he goes home. I feel like he needs a specific reason to be here, even if it's just like he's like telling her something. Because right now, I think there's a logical fallacy of like, okay, so why doesn't he go in if he drove there? Or is it that like there has to be a changing moment? Like maybe he drives because he's like, oh, you know what? I feel bad about I'm missing Fernando because of the Reverend scene. But now I'm seeing the kids. I can't. Or maybe he like sees like that there's like a line of like he looks in the kid's eyes and then maybe that's what blows him up or just something because I'm just not clear on why specifically he goes there if he doesn't want to go inside. And he doesn't have to go inside, like that's fine. I think I just need a clearer reason why he doesn't. That's my big that's for that scene. I want to get to all of them. The Billy, Brad, and Eric scene. Right now with Billy, Brad, and Eric, I love Billy, by the way. He's fun dad. I love Billy. I love fun dad characters. Right now, my problem with Brad and Eric is they're too similar of characters right now. Brad and Eric kind of feel like the same character, but they're both young children. I like the most interesting moment is when Brad and Eric are kind of picking on each other. But right now, like I remember from the previous scene, right? I remember Billy had the talking scene, but and I think it was with Brad, but like I just don't remember which one he had that like heart to heart scene with. But from a pure dialogue standpoint, Brad and Eric just feel the same. I think and this is what I would recommend, find some way to make them sound different or give them like a different personality. Because right now it genuinely feels like you could have written the same exact scenes with only one kid and still have got into the same exact point. Now, I think it can work. I think it does actually work with two kids, but you need a better differentiate them so that way they don't feel like the exact same. Because if they feel the same, then it's just a waste of space. Yeah, yeah, that's what I would suggest. Because like they both kind of feel young, and then I think maybe like usually what scripts do is usually they make the one kid super young, like the anywhere between age 5 to 8, and like especially in horrors and thrillers, they make the 5 to 8 year old, and then they do the teenager, right? So that because a teenager speaks differently than a young kid. That's one way to do it. Another way you can make one of them a girl. That's another easy way to do it. There's so many different ways, but yeah, that's what I would suggest for that. Other than that, the scene works. But I think that's just for their character description. Then who you are. And I think this missing mom's cooking is good. I get why we went for the mom's cooking bit. I think I would cut out like the first. How was dinner? I've had, but no, I mean, no, they were just eating dinner. That's fine. That's fine. Because it's following the dinner scene. Okay, so if Billy is asking about dinner, they should still be eating the dinner at the couch. I think that's why the dinner part felt a little abrupt. So if he's going to ask about dinner, Brad and I would almost think that this should be at a table of the boys still eating, but they're also watching. But you want the moment of them sitting around. So maybe them on the couch, but maybe one of them snacking. I think that's how I would go about it. Because right now is like, how come he's asking about dinner after the fact if they've been together for this time watching TV? Because I think the dinner thing is good because it leads up to the mom, which is a good ending. So I would just restructure that a little bit. Okay, perfect. That's awesome. Um, but yeah, so would say the dinner thing is just a subjective. You could do TV dinners, right? I mean, that is a thing, right? You could have them, but it's still just making it clear that it's a TV dinner. Because I know in the previous chapter, you set up the thing, you did the setup of him picking up the dinner and making a choice for it. That's some type of, but you know what? TV dinners would actually make sense for them because clearly, like, if their mom's cooking represents home cooking and their mom and the things they miss, the exact opposite of home cooking is a TV dinner. So TV or takeout. So takeout or TV dinner would actually be perfect. Um, Home cooking is a very important plot point. Yeah. So then if that's the case, do TV dinner. Either do TV dinner or cook or takeout. Right. So do like fast food. That's an easy one because you want to do the exact opposite things from home cooking because then it shows a contrast when they think of home cooking and what they miss. And that's what I would suggest. And then I want to get to the Morrison and Summers scene. Let's see, Morrison and Summers. What was I thinking? We had some good feedback a little earlier. Okay, so I think the biggest thing with the Summers and Morrison scene, I liked it. I actually felt like this scene was the strongest of this excerpt of this section. I would say, exit the large cooler sitting in the puddle. Oh, okay. So right now, this section works. It does work. I think from a script perspective, because Miss Summers is our serial killer, I think there's opportunities to add a lot more suspense to the scene. I would, especially as a thriller, and especially because we know, like, the audience is thinking Miss Summers is the killer. She's gonna kill Reverend Morrison. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now, and I think that you should up the suspense like triple. You should triple it. Anytime Miss Summers is around, it feels like we should take as many opportunities to create suspense moments because that's like we want to keep the audience on the edge with this type of script. So I would say any moments that you can find to be like Miss Summers, because Miss Summers trying to invite him in. I was like, oh, she's gonna invite him in and then stab him or like tie him up and kill him. I would say Summers, Reverend Morrison, but clearly they have a relationship, so maybe she wants to hide. And clearly, she doesn't want the help that he's trying to give her. And it almost feels like after something he should say, like it kind of like sets her off and she should do something. I think the Morrison reference to the cooking criticism is funny because that references his previous scene. That's great. I would almost recommend. Oh no, actually, were you low on food? No. She mentions the gangs. I would have her try to invite him in a couple times. Yeah, I think that would be the way to go about it. I would also use the rainstorm since it's still raining. I would use that as a suspense moment. I would like, what if he heard something from inside her house, like some type of sound? That would be a thing. I would just create a couple opportunities because like I feel like I want the audience to think that she's going to try to kill him. And I think whatever I could do to highlight that, I would. And I think there's so many ways you can go about that. And then especially after he says his the Bible verse, I would almost have her invite him in again, be like, kind of like she's upset now, and she's like, "Oh, you sure you want to like to come in and share that or something like that?" Because now she's getting upset at him. Um the gang's kind of like she wants his help, but he's not doing anything. Stops herself, lost in a memory. The Reverend glances at his watch. And then this ending scene is funny. This ending moment is funny. Him ending it off with the Reverend, with that Bible verse. And she's just like, door shut, lights out. You're like, yeah, sucks for you. Yeah, so I think that would be my only real recommendation for that scene. Sean, it would just be upping the suspense. Awesome. Yeah, and I think that's overall, I think that's all the feedback that I have for you. I mean, this last section was so short. I don't think there's too much to speak on right now. I don't know who June Cleaver is, but that could just be my lack of pop culture. Whenever we reference celebrities or predominant figures, um, just know that you're taking a chance on whoever your agent is or whoever your producer is to pick up the script. You're taking a chance that they know who they are. If you think of A-listers that are predominant, if you said someone like Rihanna, everyone knows Rihanna. If you say Beyonce, everybody knows Beyonce. When you use ones, Leave It to Beaver. That's funny. Yeah, and you see, the only thing is you take the chance, but producer might not know the reference. If they don't, then they miss the description opportunity. So June Cleaver is from an old TV. Yeah, no, I know Leave It to Beaver. I never really watched it, but I heard great things about it. So I would just use a more modern reference, and that's specifically because whoever you're pitching it to, you don't want to chance them missing out on the reference. That more than anything else. I love it. We got Leave It to Beaver. Sean, you're like the mother. June Cleaver is from an old TV series, and then John was like, "We getting old, Sean." I'm like, I'm I'm like, clearly the reference went right over my head. Oh shit. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So we got that, and that is that's all that I got for you today. I hope that helped. Overall, the scene's very well. The overall excerpts are very well written. I think just each section just needs some fine tuning to get it to the next portion, is my guess. But I mean, that could also be Atomic. I'm glad you referenced ET. That could also be because I don't watch comedies as much. So like I would be more familiar with like older science fiction and fantasy references than I would be with comedies. Of course, glad that was helpful, my man. I'm glad we were able to help you out. Okay. Let's see. Who do we got next on deck? Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, I think I can do it. All right, so let's get the next one. Let's see. Ketan. I got the Jamboree. Ketan, I got your story, the Jamboree on deck. We're going to be reading the next portion of the story, which I'm super excited about. we got into some detective sleuthing with our characters from last time. Atomic, you said E.T. and I definitely thought E.T. I'm like, that's what I'm thinking. Entertainment tonight. I'm happy to be of entertainment to you guys. Ketan, I got your story on deck. Let me set up your story. All right, where was I? Okay, so let's see, where do I got? And before we get to Ketan, finally got caught up. Been doing, yeah, that totally happens. A lot of times, like especially with me, like when I'm watching live streams or videos, always throw them on in the background, and because I always have to be multitasking, that totally happens, Bethany. Welcome to the present. By the way, before we hop into this, I want to do a quick shout out. KaleidoScript Magazine. So they're a brand. We did our podcast interview with them. Was that 2 weeks ago? A week ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. So I had a really good Creative Right Now podcast interview with them. We were talking about doing short stories. They had this really exciting online magazine called KaleidoScript. I've partnered with them, and I'm helping with some editing services. Right now, I wanted to do a quick shout out. You guys should go check out the magazine. This is the newest issue, which is super cool. Newest issue that just came out. You should check out the magazine. We got some really exciting stuff in it. There's some really good short stories. But it's a short story magazine. You can submit your magazine, or you can submit your story, your short story, for free. No, it doesn't cost. You can do as many submissions as you want until it's accepted. Once it's accepted, you get one free publication, one of their issues, and then you have to pay for future publications. So you guys should definitely check it out. Go check out the magazine. If you like nonfiction short stories, which is the first like 60-70% of it is nonfiction, then the last third of it is fantasy fiction, which is super cool. So they cater to two different audiences. Their mission is to bridge fiction with reality. So go check it out. And then to subscribe to the magazine, it's a quarterly one. I believe it's a $30 for a quarterly subscription, but you should go check that out. The link is in the YouTube description down below. The link is an affiliate link, so use my affiliate link. I'd appreciate it. And I appreciate you. Had to make sure that I did that. But I love partnering with smaller businesses and highlighting things that are doing really well to help writers trying to like get their work out there, especially as for both free and low cost options. So I wanted to throw that out there. Definitely go check them out. Awesome. And then with that plug, let's move on to Ketan, the Jamboree. So we got the first couple of sections of it previously. Ketan, let me know if you're here in the stream. I know it's super late over there for you, so you might be here on the replay, but let's see what we can get through. Okay. So we got Ketan and the Jamboree. And let me pull up my screen. Awesome. Excellent. Glad to have you here, my man. Glad we could get through your story today. Okay. So let me drop this timer 20 minutes. So as you'll know, we've done a couple sections of Ketan's story. I'm just starting from the last page of what we had previously started with, as Shawshank and Dee are going on this like sleuthing as they're trying to understand what happened to these two girls who went missing and were captured by these like mysterious robed guys. So let's see what's happening. All right. Let me make sure y'all can see. This might be. All right. So I got 20 minutes on the clock. Shashank and Dee went to the common laboratory and waited, as they knew that the man drank hard and was going to come over there to piss. Soon the man came, and Dee held him from behind, and Shashank put a dagger on the man's throat. Spit out everything you know about the missing girls, threatened Dee. I don't know anything. I don't know anything. It is only that I heard that the 2 girls are missing from the village, Thumpa, stuttered the horrified man. I think he doesn't know much. Leave him. He has pissed in his pants, told Shashank to Dee. The man fled from there in panic. Look, we need to do something before the fear spreads to the town. Fear is always bigger than the danger itself, said Shashank. I know, man, but we don't have much information. Perhaps we should pry into Chandak's life, as these 2 men talking weird things about him, suggested Dee. I don't think so, Dee. We don't know much about Chandak. What these men were talking might only be rumors, said Shashank in disagreement. I think we should tell all this to Yudi. He is the only man with power and wisdom to fight against this invisible threat. Dee came with another suggestion. Shashank immediately agreed. You are right, and asked, but where the hell is he? I haven't seen him for a long time. So have I, but I know where he would be, replied Dee thoughtfully. It was a few hours to dawn, and the sky was gloomy and hopeless, as if there wouldn't be any ray of light. A howling gust of wind blew as they untethered their stallions. However, they looked at each other and passed over the nature's harbinger. As soon as they spurred their horses, they rose high in the air, neighing, and into a gallop at once. The wind was picking up a pace behind them. The trees fringed along the edges of the track swayed to and fro, but they didn't care. They knew that the storm was following them, but at the same time, they also knew the earnestness of the task and that they had something to do which didn't include a saw in a long time. The storm passed away through the woods. Extinguishing a torch outside Yudi's cottage. As they reached there, both walked toward the cottage. Dee patted Yudi's white furry stud, which was tethered to a tree, and it also recognized Dee. Shashank lit the torch from the campfire, in which the embers were still smoldering. At any other time, Dee would have kicked hard on Yudi's ass to wake him up, but not this time. They knew that Yudi was not in a good state of mind, so they tried to wake him up gently. However, Yudi was fast asleep, rather unconscious due to heavy intoxication. Therefore, Shashank and Dee stopped trying and slept. Next day, Shashank and Dee went for hunting in the early morning, as they were hungry, especially Dee, as Shashank did not let him finish his food previous night. In the noon, Yudi was getting conscious while Dee and Shashank were talking about the sad and strange incidents happening earlier. Both heard Yudi's moans as he rose and stopped talking. At first, Yudi did not get who they were. Did not get who were they as he saw them through his heavy eyelids. But when they greeted him, Yudi recognized them by their voice. There wasn't any expression on Yudi's face. He was neither happy nor unhappy by seeing them. He just grabbed a flagon of liquor and took a sip to rinse his mouth. What have you been doing here? The town is enjoying the Jamboree. You know your father was concerned about you, asked Shashank. Why? You should have told him that nothing is going to happen to me. You see, I have survived a complete separation from my wife, and still here I am, alive and intact, chuckled Yudi. Now, it was the time to come to the point. Shashank had a little sense of what they were going to face while convincing him to help. Yudi was too witty to argue with. He was a short-tempered man. However, Shashank also knew that they would ultimately convince him because Yudi was a rare combination. A fierce warrior, yet polite, where he needed to be. A macho, yet humane. Shashank gestured at Dee not to drink much, as he knew what they needed their senses, and started. Hey man, are we here to pull you out of these lethargic, self-loathing dog days? What? What did you just say? You call this dog days? You know what? You shouldn't have come here. Go fuck yourself. Yudi turned the other side and guzzled the rest of the liquor in the flagon. He was already in pain, and that statement made it more painful. Then he turned around and started explaining in a dull voice and careless manner. You know why I come here? I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. Everything that happens has a reason, including why you both are here. However, it is not so in case as I haven't found any reason yet. He kept drinking while explaining further. I haven't seen my mom. Why? I don't remember much my childhood. Why? My father has a lonely and miserable life. Why? Devika left me. Why? Why we never get the comfort we wanted? And the whys became louder. Why? If I had the answers, I would have already given you. No one has actually. If we have all the answers, then there's no need of God. People wouldn't go to Lord Shiva, said Shashank and continued. Now listen, we have a problem, and that's why we are here. You need to join us, solve this problem. It is about our town. How can I solve your problem when I don't have any solution for mine? Countered Yudi. It is not only our problem, it is yours as well. Just let the human within you rise again and look around. Let bygones be bygones. Life doesn't stop at someone's going away, you dumbass, replied Shawshank. It is not someone's going away, Shawshank. It is that I'm a loser. And how do you think a loser can help you? Argued Yudi. Just try to peep into yourself, Yudi. You are still that man who loved everything around, who was hearty, who helped everyone, and in every possible way. Just try to be that man again. I beg you. Let's just stop this never-ending fuss and come to the point. What is it? Asked Yudi, taking a little interest. Hell yeah. That's like our old Yudi, shouted Dee. Dee and Shawshank were happy now, but at the same time worried also that they didn't know anything about the occurrences properly. Yudi was waiting to hear about the problem. Is there anything else to whom you want to tell this to? Asked Yudi. No. We are just thinking what to say, as we only know that 4 innocent girls are missing during the Jamboree. 2 from Village Thumpa and 2 from our town. But we don't know exactly how and from where, replied Shawshank. What? Missing girls? They might have lost their way. They come back, said Yudi. No, it's been 3 days since the incident in Thumpa. Something bad has happened to them, I think, said Shawshank. Yes, I also think so. We heard people talk about this and they're really in panic, added Dee and continued. Not only that, but 2 magic creatures also attacked during the competitions in the carnival in our town. Moreover, some people were also talking about the recent weird behavior of the new commander of the Royal Army. Look, Dee, we can't accuse anyone without proof. The person people are talking about is not an ordinary man. We need some solid ground to accuse such a man. Let's go and search who is behind this. Let's go to Thumpa. I have a friend over there, said Yudi. And end reading. Nice job on forwarding the plot here. So I actually am really happy. I'm really happy, Ketan, that you finally combined Yudi with Dee and Shawshank. I actually, once again, I really love Yudi's personality. I think you do a really good job of showing the friendship between the 3 of the characters. That's something that I really, really enjoy. I love like the interaction between the 3 is really fun. And I think we actually get some really cool opportunities for kind of combining the 3 of them. You have some good dialogue moments. I think the biggest opportunity right now is just combining a little bit more action in between their dialogue, because right now what's happening is you're doing a lot more telling in this section than showing. Except the previous scene that you had written from the bathroom scene was actually a perfect adjustment. Oh, and two structural things. Let's see. So two of the structural things, Ketan, make sure quotation marks. They should all be quotation marks. Anytime a character's speaking, quotation mark, not a comma. Commas are more or not comma, apostrophe. So if character's speaking, always use quotation marks. And then it would be like this. Now it'd be the correct way to format that. So we would have the quotation mark, the dialogue. The comma is always ending off inside the dialogue. And then we have the speech tag. So I think that would be my recommendation for that. I would say there's also some opportunities, and you could actually probably cut out some of the speech tags. Yeah, so then that would be like this. Yeah, so I think it would be like this. I don't know anything. It's only that I heard that 2 girls are missing from the village. Started the horrified man. And then the rest of this was fine. I mean, the speech tags and the quotation marks is my suggestion, like for the entire story. But in terms of the specific moments, like the content itself is fine. I actually like how you adjusted this laboratory scene. This laboratory scene is so much more direct than what you had previously. Really great job on adjusting and making edits. This laboratory scene works way, way better. It's just direct to the point, and we get that Dee and Shawshank basically went to interrogate him, and he's just straight, and we know what's happening. Really great work on adjusting this. And this is funny. I think he doesn't know much, leave him. He has pissed in his pants. Like, that's funny. The man fled there in the panic. And then they're talking about Chandak. They're like, maybe we go interrogate him. I'm fine with that. Awesome. I like that because basically their interrogation or their strategy is try to interrogate the man they overhear. It doesn't work. They're like, oh, let's go interrogate Chandak. No, not a good idea. Let's go talk to Yudi. Great plot choice. That works out very well. And then this is the next section. And you could have done this in the story. This could be a formatting thing, but just make sure that you break up the section somehow with some type of just section break. Do it whatever you want. Sometimes people use asterisk. Sometimes people use lines. Just do something that breaks them, or a new chapter, whatever you want to do. So just that way we know that time's passing, or that time passed. And I was fine with this. Like, you did a good job of setting up the scene. So, like, the beginning was a really good setup. You give enough description. Like, it's kind of like a gloomy sky, and passed over the Nature's Harbinger. I'm not quite sure what the Nature's Harbinger is. I don't know if that's like just a metaphorical reference or if that's an actual place. And I would just make sure to clarify that. And then I wasn't sure. So they knew that the storm was following them. That's great. That's great foreshadowing. But at the same time, they also didn't know the earnestness of the task and that they had something to do, which didn't include a saw in a long time. I would say just either cut that or rephrase it. I would like cut it down to the storm was following them, end it there, because the rest of that just doesn't make sense to me. I just wasn't sure. They knew the storm was following them. The storm passed away through the woods, extinguishing a torch outside Yudi's cottage. Yeah, I would end it like that. Then they get to Yudi's cottage, which is good. Yudi's white furry stud. I like that. So like the description there from them getting to Yudi's cottage is there's this white stud outside. Is a stud a type of horse? I'm just like assuming it's a type of horse, but I'm not sure. That could just be a me thing that I don't know. And I like that. Like the setup for this scene is good. And then I would just add a little description there on what do they see, because it's not so. At any other time, D would have kicked hard on Yudi's ass to wake him up, but not this time. I would just say like, what does D look like? Is D or not D? What does Yudi look like? Is Yudi passed out on the ground on his face, or is he sitting in a chair next to a campfire? I think I just need a little like a sentence. You could do like maybe a couple sentences on like what is he doing? What does he look like? Is he like have 2 bottles of alcohol in either hand? Is he clearly like drunk? I would just clarify that, because it would give better setting for their how they're going to wake him up. Yeah, because this is good. So like I would actually start with this. I would move this to the beginning. I would say Yudi was fast asleep. I would set up what they see of Yudi like physically. Oh, gotcha. So here in India and Britain as well, novels have a single inverted comma for dialogues. That's why I'm habitual. Okay, then and Ketan, if that's the case, that's a regional difference. Then ignore that. Ignore the thing with quotations. Absolutely ignore that. Thanks for sharing that with me, because in different parts of the world, there's going to be different standards for structure. I'm actually glad that you said that. So like if there is like structural differences like that and you see that as a common thing, that's a really good call out. Then I keep the dialogue the same then, if that's the case. Yeah, and this is something I agree. So like there's some really great dialogue here, Katan. You're telling a really interesting conversation between Shawshank, D, and Yudi. Um, I like that Yudi's kind of like in this drunken, like, oh, woe is me. The world sucks. I'm poor me. I like the setup for this. And you can tell Yudi is kind of just like in this drunken stupor. And then I would like, from a plot standpoint, why do they wait a whole day? If girls are in danger and they're like dying or they're missing, wouldn't they just like kick him and wake him up quickly? From like logistical standpoint, I would almost skip that, or I would almost cut this and have them go into like kick him. Yeah, and that's a really good call out that you guys are talking about, and like how is he feeling? I think right now, as we get into the conversation itself, both heard Yudi's moans as he doesn't stop talking. At first, Yudi did not get to. This is good. Yudi recognized the mother voice. There wasn't any expression. I like this. I like the setup for him. Like clearly, he's just like, you guys are here, and he's gonna keep drinking his problems away. Um, hmm. So I like, and once again, I like the way that you do your wording and that you combine it for each of the like characters' unique personalities. I think it's clear for me when Shashank is speaking and when Yudi is speaking. I think what would serve well, Ketan, is I would think from each of their yeah, and I think from each of their dialogue, Ketan, I think what I would do is you could cut down. There's a couple of different sections of their dialogue where it feels a little wordy. Let's see. Wow, you should have told him that nothing is going to happen to me. So let's see. What have you been doing here? Well, the town is enjoying the Jamboree. You know your father was concerned about you, asked Shashank. Why? You should have told him that nothing is going to happen to me. You see. I would like cut out that why is irrelevant. I would say you should have told him that nothing is going to happen to me. I I think there's opportunities where you can kind of refine some of the dialogue so you can get to the point a little sooner. And realistically, Catan, what it needs is it just needs a line edit, right? Like you need an editor to go through section by section and just cut out unnecessary dialogue. Um, you should have told him that nothing is going to happen to me. I have survived a complete separation from my wife, and I am, and still here I am. I have survived a complete separation from my wife, and I am, and I still am, and still I am alive and intact. Chuckled Yudi. Yeah, that would be my recommendation because, like, Catan, you have some really good dialogue. You have some good sections here, but I think we're at the point in the story where the plot is clear. Your plot is very clear so far. Your characters are interesting, but it just needs editing, right? So it's like you need somebody to go through line by line and edit each of like the sentences. It's really what it is. Because the sentences work. It's like time for it. It just needs to be cleaned up. That's more than anything. So that way it makes it clear. Now it's time to come to the point. Shashank had a little sense of what they were going to face while convincing him to help. Yudi was too witty to argue with. He was a short-tempered man. However, Shashank also knew that they would ultimately convince him because Yudi was a rare combination. A fierce warrior, yet polite where he needed to be. A macho, yet humane. And I like that. That's actually a really interesting. And now I would actually like even cut this. Like, for example, like now it's time to come to the point. I don't think we actually need that sentence. I would say Shashank had a little sense. Shashank had a little sense of what they were going to face while convincing him to help. I think that's good. Yudi was too witty to argue with. He was a short-tempered man. He was a short-tempered man. However, Shashank. And I would cut this. So he was a short-tempered man. I would say like this sentence, like you could cut this because we're going to actually be showing this through the dialogue, right? And then this gives a better, just clear description. I would say Yudi was too witty to argue with. He was a short-tempered man, a fierce warrior, yet polite where he needed to be. A macho, yet humane. And I like that because that packs a little bit more punch. Just makes it a little less wordy. Shashank gestured D not to drink much as he knew that they needed their senses and started. Hey man, we are here to pull you out of these lethargic, self-loathing dog days. What did you just say? You call this dog days? You know what? You shouldn't have come here. Go fuck yourself. Oh, that's funny. So Shashank gestured D not to drink much as he knew what they needed their senses and started. So instead of Shashank gesturing, why doesn't Shashank just try to take one of the bottles from him? Because like this could provide a really good action part of like Shashank tries to take one of the just Shashank gestured D not to drink as much as he knew that they needed their senses. Oh, for D. Okay, so because D's drinking as well. Like maybe Shashank tries to take a bottle from D, but D clutches the bottle. Or maybe D sets it down and he convinces them. So like you could further explain that through the action. Yeah, I had it. I had it in that, and that is clear. That is absolutely clear. And I think you've made that really clear through the dialogue. Yeah, so I think what it is, Ketan, I think what would help is because this section is now super dialogue heavy. And I think what we need is we need a little bit of their action interspersed in between the dialogue. So, like, this is good right here. So, Shashank gestured D not to drink as much as he knew that they needed their senses. And I would then add like a little, like more description, like D looked at the bottle, or like D looked at the bottle, thought about taking, D looked at the bottle and put it put it away, right? And I would add, and then Shashank started, and then right. So I would do, you want to do a couple more things like that. So we just get like a little bit more action because D doesn't speak too much in this scene. But now, even from this, I know that D's kind of, it's a little clear what D's trying to like struggle with as he's kind of watching them. So I think like a really good opportunity, Ketan, is just that each section find some opportunities for like, can we add like, even if it's just a sentence of action in between some of the dialogue, because we know what you do. I get the overall sense what Shashank, D, and Yudi are thinking through their, and what they're feeling through what they're saying. I also want that layered sense of what they're feeling through the physical things that they're doing, because those two will tell a fuller story and it just makes it clearer for your reader. We want to make it as clear as possible and as easy to be a reader. And it's like this. I would say like lethargic is good, but I think I would still cut that because I would get to the point. We're here to pull you out of these self-loathing dog days. What did you just say? And then even here, I would say, because like that, I get why he's saying that, but I would even just get to the point and say, you call this dog days? You shouldn't have come here. Go fuck yourself. Or even like, I would just go like straight here, because then what we do is we get to the point, and this is funny. So like what you had previously, like you call this dog days, go fuck yourself. Yudi pointed a finger as he stumbled, as he fell on the ground, and reached for another bottle. Right? So you see, I want to do things like that where I've cleaned up the dialogue, and this is just to the point, right? This still tells the reader the same thing, right? So Shawshank started, hey man, we're here to pull you out of these self-loathing dog days. You called this dog days? Go fuck yourself. Yudi pointed his finger as he fell on the ground and reached for another bottle. Right? So you see, that gives me a little, the dialogue's a little more concise, and it gives me the action. And I think that would be my recommendation for each section of this dialogue, because I like that. And then you give some action here, which is great. You'd turn the other side and guzzle the rest of the liquor in the flagon. I like that. He was already in pain, and their statement made it more painful. And then this, so I would just clarify, who is your point of view character? Who is the point of view right now? Is the point of view character the main one? Is it Yudi or is it Shashank? If Shashank is who we're seeing the story through right now, you would cut Yudi's interiority. And you would do this. So Yudi turn the other side and guzzle the rest of the liquor in the flagon. You would do something like Shashank could tell that his friend was already in pain, and that statement made it more painful, right? If Shashank is who we're experiencing the story through in this scene, then you do things like that. However, if Yudi is who we're seeing the point of view, then you keep it like Yudi, because we do want the interiority, but we want to keep the interiority for whoever the point of view character is. And then I like this. You know why I come here? I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. You know why I come here? I come here to find reasons. I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. So I actually get why he says that everything that happens is a reason, but if he's upset, I don't actually think this is necessary at this specific piece of dialogue. I would say, you know why I come here? I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. And then I would break this up. So then I would go, um, I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. Yudi looks at the bottle and continues and says, however, it is not so. However, I haven't found any reason yet. Right. So you see, like, this is just a little clearer, right? So I've given a piece of dialogue. You know why I come here? I come here to find reasons for whatever happened in my life. Yudi looks at the bottle and says, however, I haven't found any reasons yet. And you see, this is just a little clearer. Yeah. So I mean, Ketan, I just want to give you like a couple examples because at heart, like this is a really interesting scene. And I love Yudi's character. I absolutely love him. And he's going through this why. And I don't have time to do a full line edit of every single paragraph. But I wanted to give you a really good example or a couple so that way you could do it on your own if you wanted to. But that would be my recommendation. Just go through like each dialogue, cut down some unnecessary like words that feel extra, and then just intersperse with a little more action. And that way just makes it clearer. But I would do that for the rest of the scene. And thank you for telling me about the quotation marks. I completely missed that. So it's actually really good to know. But the overall flow, I love the flow of the scene. And I love how Yudi gets to them at the end. And he's like, all right, boys, let's do it. I love that they convince him. I think that's interesting. Yeah, and they're kind of getting to the point of the story, right? They're talking about the magic creatures and the royal army. And they're talking about how they need to go deal with the magic creatures. And Yudi like kind of has the answer. And I like that. I like that Yudi is kind of the voice of reason and he kind of knows what to do. I actually think that's really interesting. And of course, he's the one who suggests where they should go to next. Um, Yeah, so I mean, overall, Ketan, I would say once again, your character development is really great in the scene. Character development is great. I would say the plot is great because the plot works. And then the world building, you do a lot of good world building. It's just like specifically for this section, you just need to clean up the dialogue and then the structure and grammar. So that would be my recommendation. And then you asked a good question earlier. You were saying, please let me know, Jared and others here, that is the first chapter having a good book. So I think you're saying, is it a good book? I mean, yeah, Ketan, you have a great story here. I think you have a great story, and I think you have a really unique, style to your storytelling, which I absolutely love. And like any writer, Ketan, you get to a point eventually where if your goal is for it to be published and for you to make money off of it and for you to have other people read it, you're going to have to get to a point where you need to hire an editor, right? Or if you're trying to do something low cost, find another writer who also needs their story edited and trade stories. That's my recommendation, right? So it's like, because like I can tell your writing or this story is improving so much. I love how it's improving and it's a really interesting story. And I could definitely see people being interested in this because you have some really interesting themes. You have some very interesting, like a world and things that I haven't even seen. And I still really want to know who these like robed portal guys are. And you've set up a really good like mystery caper for them wanting to go figure out like what happened to these girls? So yeah, I would say you have a good first chapter. I know this is good, and I know we've gone through the earlier sections, so I would say just it just needs editing more than anything. So that's kind of that's all that I got for you though today, man. I'm glad that I was able to get through this next section. Thanks for sending it over, and definitely once again, let me know in future weeks if you want me to go through like different submissions for you, and I'm definitely happy to help you out. But I hope all that helped out. Ketan, I really appreciate you. All right. And let's see. So we are at number 5. Okay. And we got some really great stories down so far. Let me see. So it looks like I got about 3 or 4 more stories. Okay. So my voice is done. That's about all. That's all that I can get through for today's readings. Let's see. Where are we at? So here's what I'm going to do. If you're trying to think about, so I'm going to all right, let's do it. I'm going to do my writing sprint, 20 minutes. I'm going to do it. All right. But before I get into the writing sprint, if you're looking for something to watch next, go check out the reading sprints for storytellers. So if you're on YouTube, it's down in the description. There's a playlist that it's called the reading sprints for storytellers. It's some of the previous Saturday story and critique shows that are time coded. So that way you can hop in and read different stories. So go check out the playlist if you're looking for something similar to go check out and watch next. There are some great story shows, great story and critique shows that we've done previously. So really, really cool. And then also remember to come back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, and come check out the Flow, the Creative Right Now podcast as I interview and sit down with Flow Your Mojo. Awesome. And I'm going to hop into my daily writing sprint. I got to get 20 minutes on the clock, so I'm going to change it here. I need to open up Last Scarecrow. Feel free to join me if you need to get some writing done. I'm going to throw up some music. Let's see. I need to open up. All right, here we go. So let me throw this up here. So once again, if you're feeling creative right now, feel free to join me. We got 20 minutes on the clock, super easy writing sprint, or you can sit back and I'll work on my story and I'll write vicariously for the both of us. All right, so I'm going to throw up the music, Atomic Elf playlist. Daily writing sprint, 20 minutes. And it's time right now. Of course, Ketan. I'm really happy that I'm able to help you out. Absolutely, my man. All right. That was a good little writing sprint. I feel like I'm like kind of playing around with how I want them to go about this puzzle. I know the puzzle itself, I'm kind of playing around with some different ideas. I know what needs to happen. Like I know the next major thing that needs to happen. I'm going to play around with some different ways to kind of get them to that next moment. But I really like the idea, this visualization that as a group, they're kind of just wandering aimlessly through a graveyard of which it's just everything looks the same. There's just hundreds on thousands of different tombstones as they're surrounded by this like very dense wall of fog. So I thought it was like very scenic, and I was like, I wanted to keep playing around with that. So we'll continue to see how, if what happens, what do they find, and how and what comes next, because we're about to have another very big scene on the near horizon. Some crazy stuff is about to go down. Let's see. I'm looking in the comments here. Let's see, Ketan, you're saying, what is copy editing for word choice? Yeah, Talink was like, copy editing is about making sure text is clear, readable, and error-free. Mm-hmm. And usually copy editing is usually a copy editor will go like word by word, section by section. They'll usually focus on word choice, grammar, dictation. Sometimes line editing and copy editing are very similar, but essentially they'll go through the structure and make sure that things are clear and that they're concise. So great. Thanks for answering that, Atomic. All right. So we got some good stuff. As I look forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Creative Right Now podcast. Come back and join us for the fun. 12 p.m. Mountain Time. It will be a good show. Come watch it with your mothers. All right. And this is that's what I got for you today, writers. We went once again our longest stream. We got some great stories, great storytelling, great feedback, great critiques. So if you missed anything, make sure to hop to the beginning. I'll time code so you can hop to the part that brings you the most value. What's up, LeMay? Glad you can make it into the stream, my friend. I had a really great time going through your stories. I know I missed a couple of excerpts. Know that if I didn't get to your story, we'll get it for next weekend's show. So once again, I appreciate you, and that is all that I got. Don't forget, tap that like button on your way out. Let me know that you enjoyed the stream. And that's the show, my friends. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kauffman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, right?